G'day everyone, good to see you all. As you can see, I'm just relaxing, chilled out, sitting back, enjoying myself. Was setting up just a moment ago. And we're still waiting for, it's only 3 people. Where is everyone? God, people getting notifications. G'day, Kate. Yes. Jared said he's got his sister coming over, so he may pop in later. He doesn't know yet. So I did send him a link. I don't know whether Lukey feels like coming on. Raminka. G'day, mate. Good to see you. And so you're having some really good food at the moment. Enjoy. Hope you've been enjoying some of my recent anti-repeat and sort of touching a bit on the iron stuff and all that everybody talks about and constantly I hear on the interwebs. Good. Hope you've been sharing that around. Hey, mate, trouble. I haven't even had a shower. I just basically got up, answered a whole lot of things on YouTube. Then I started cleaning up things around my place, and then forgot about the time and looked at it and go, oh, shit. So I just quickly brushed my hair. As you can see, it looks okay. It's fucking grown. Look how much it's fucking grown. Look at this. Look at this fucking growth here. Look at this thickness. Fucking hell, for a man with genetics for alopecia and baldness and all that, I must be doing it wrong. Here's these repeat guys are all on sugar, on kibble, and losing their hair like Georgie Wankoff that gets on Robbie's show. And here's Harry, with underlying genetics, predisposition, and can't fucking stop that damn hair from growing and thickening and all that. I'm sick of it, God, most of my money goes to the barbers. It's ridiculous. I need to get on a kibble diet and thin out a bit. Yes, all that damn protein. Too much protein. Too much sulfur amino acids. Too much stuff to basically build, that gel, that tissue, too much. That's just, yes. I'm turning into that big fucking rat on high protein, I hope I get the horny side as well. Don't know how Mira's going to feel about that, but I better not go there. Oh, masterclasses. Oh, thank you, Lukey. Thank you. Yes. We need to deal with the cockwombles of the world. G'day, Shell. Good to see you. Hair looks great. I need a haircut. Fucking hell, again, Wasn't... God, it keeps on fucking growing. I'm sick of it. It's one downside about the carnivore diet. My hair just grows I just end up with too many barber costs. We have one in Tasmania, a tallow-based one. So what is it called? Tassie tallow or something like that. God. And better put that up. And there's the Tassie tallow Come on, do the sharing. And there it is. So basically, they've actually got tallow soaps, artisan 4-pack. That's a single one. They've got a moisturizer. They've got a few things here. They're a bit pricey in that regard. I've used them. They're quite nice. We've got candles and all sorts of things. So I can tell you the candles actually last longer than the actual beehive ones. The beehive ones actually tend to, get overused, which is a downside in that regard. Put myself back on. MSM sulfur. It actually helps the keratin, sort of the binding of. So it also for the skin as well. Sulfur amino acids in general. If you're methionine, taurine, MSM, these sort of things. If you get enough meat, you should get enough sulfur. The reason why I was using MSM and was for the oxalate dumping side of things. So, the general stuff you find, John, in animal foods, like, when it comes to as long as you don't have, like, I've got a photo bleaching effect. So UV will bleach my hair. And because I end up outdoors now far more for the vitamin D, I get more of this sort of grayish hair. Most of my relatives went grey very early, even my mum in her 30s. So, so basically it's a genetic thing. Obviously, multiple generations of kibble and all sorts of other crap obviously made these genetics more pronounced, like baldness and stuff like that, like Bart has. It's just one of those things. It takes multiple generations to reverse that. I'm not going to be around to get the benefit, it'll only be the descendants. So it won't help me much. But things obviously, as long as you're eating an animal-based diet that has sufficient micronutrients, you get, if you're eating enough meat, you should get enough copper, zinc, enough of all these nutrients to basically support, and the fat-soluble vitamins and minerals and the amino acids that you need to have good hair, good tissue, and all that. So, it's like, me and the sort of elastic, sort of the skin, the way it actually is, nice. And, for me in my mid-50s, other people that I know are much younger than me and have got worse skin and, no elasticity to their skin or stuff like that. So it's an animal-based diet. It makes a difference. And I've been doing it for, in the last, you could say, couple of years now, probably carnivorous for, getting close to 2.5 years. Prior to that, more high carnivorous, low carb type diet. And then, so it's probably 7 odd years. So it takes a while. You have to up the nutrient density. If you like liver, consume a bit of liver as well. That helps, especially for people that may have, some underlying deficiencies when they came into the carnivore diet, not enough copper, not enough fat-soluble vitamins and stuff like that. So you may want to up some of this sort of stuff with organ meats. It's in most societies, they will use organ meats in small amounts every day as sort of like a supplemental thing, like a multivitamin. If you don't have underlying deficiencies and stuff like that, then it's probably less of an issue. just a general, some steak and eggs and stuff like that, and some seafood, or, will pretty much cover you for the general micronutrient stuff. It's only when you're deficient where you may need to add more. It's a bit like Terry Walls, who added a lot of organ meats because she was very deficient in a lot of things, and sort of a larger part of her reversal of her condition of MS was related to that as well. So I just saw Lukey say it's fucking nonsense, absolute nonsense. Greeks consume in the 70s and 80s when I was in Greece, Greeks consumed liver on a daily basis. Small amounts, but on a daily basis. We're not talking here about, eating, like the liver of a whale or some massive quantity. We're talking about small amounts of liver, not an issue. It's basically a multivitamin. Plenty of populations consumed cod liver oil, cod liver, and different organ meats for a very long time. So, not an issue whatsoever, Lukey. You have to really consume very large. We're talking about massive, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of IUs. It's, you'd have to basically be eating liver, large livers like this 3 times a day or whatever. It's, and even then you probably won't get to toxic levels. So no, it's garbage. Where it could actually be a problem if you're consuming a lot of, like the shit vitamins. So if you're actually taking a lot of multivitamins with a lot of these man-made shit, toxic vitamin A or precursors like beta-carotene and crap like that, yeah, you could probably cause some issues there. But otherwise, nope. If you're eating species-appropriate foods, not going to be an issue. And most people can't even convert beta-carotene, so it's crap. So it just accumulates in the yes. So now let me get back to where I was, that other sport. Yeah, so basically, John, just eat a more mixed diet. So I usually say to people, have some organ meats, have some mussels. Mussels, a lot of the crustaceans are very rich in minerals. So if you want those extra minerals, well, you can get a mineral supplement. I very rarely use my mineral supplement. I try to basically occasionally go down to the waterfront and actually buy, some, crustaceans and stuff like that, and cook them and make a bit of a soup, like a fish soup with crustaceans and all that. Put some, remember the method of, beating up some eggs and putting some of the warm fluids in the eggs and beating them so they bring them to the same temperature, so they don't solidify. Then throwing it in, mixing it up, putting a bit of lemon juice, salt and pepper. Beautiful soup with a lot of minerals in it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things you can do. Mix it up, vary it, and because all different animal foods have variations. Populations traditionally varied the stuff that they actually incorporated. So there's no reason why we shouldn't do the same thing. I don't think there was any species that just ate a steak-only diet. Even though steaks have got most of the nutrition that human body needs, I still think that you should add other things like eggs and seafood and stuff like that. I think it's a much healthier way of living. It's more what our ancestors did. They lived along coastlines and rivers and accessed all variety of animal foods. So I think there's something in that. And a lot of carnivores have switched in that direction as well, adding more different, diverse variety of animal foods, which is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's genetics with the white hair and stuff like that. Like my mother side in particular, her dad's a bit, but not to the same level. Dad's more baldness type things, conditions, even though actually mum's brother had a bit of alopecia issues. So I don't know whether it's in mum's side, maybe on both sides. So, and I was actually getting some baldness and bald spots and alopecia myself and losing some of my hair before when I was on kibble. So it's just nowadays I'm outdoors mostly and I'm actually greying my hair. So can't win. And I don't like wearing hats. I sweat too much because I've got this like genes which are sort of similar to people that are in sort of mountainous regions, which tend to be protective against, if you're in a cold environment from, frostbites and all these sort of things. So it's a sort of a protective. So you actually, when you move, your internal temperature increases quite a bit. Some people can have more brown adipose tissue compared to others. And that's where it's coming from. So I don't like, wearing hats. It's just, I end up sweating down my face and all that. It's just unsightly and annoying. So, yeah, can't win. Shit happens. Just, that's the way life is. Yes. Nothing like a good big protein day. Put hairs on your chest, Lukey. Yes. Then we'll have to get somebody to pluck them. You have their moisturizer. So you're aware of them, Kate. Good. Easy. There's like City Organic, they've got a couple of things as well. They've got a number of varieties. I just can't remember. I've actually used one of their recent varieties, which was that's not too bad, that one, actually. I actually enjoyed that one. It was a plant-based one, but it had no crap or anything like that. And so there was, and it also, that it had basically like animal products in it. It actually had, like the butter, it was a dairy-based component in it as well, which was interesting. It was actually quite nice. Nice, some plant compounds, which gave it a really nice scent. So I enjoyed that. I actually got these scented stuff as well at Salamanca, which you can put in your bath at high. You have to increase the temperature, and it's really, it's got quite a lot of minerals and some. I'm going to try that actually. I was going to try it last night. I just didn't get around doing it. I should have. Anyway, got to spoil myself. Oh, talking about hair, he's balding pushed by. That's reductionist. Not really. There are people that have got high DHT and others that have got lower and still have baldness. It's a more complicated, it's associated, but whether it's actually been ever proven to be causal, not really. The literature is very mixed on it. There are associations of all sorts, but we're still. Yeah, so it's a bit like that. Yes, and please hit that damn like button. Yes, it does. You basically, that probably requires a bit of a video and going through and looking at ancestral posture and some of the stuff we've done. So that would take I'd be here for half an hour. So I'm going to have to, that is on a list of things to do later this year. So you'll have to wait until then, John. But I would, if I was you, I'd get a standing desk and I'd use a standing desk and not sit too much. And, work on your glutes as well. I've had to, because I've had pain by sitting down and had issues and had to learn the hard way. So you can get a rolling pin to help it initially with the actual glutes. Anyway. Yes, Kate always is a solid supporter. Thank you, Kate. Don't know. I never counted it, actually. I just eat food, actually real food. I don't try and actually do these crazy things that everybody else does for whatever reason. I don't know. Just eat food in that regard. I have got a video that it will be coming on, we'll be doing in the not too distant future, which will be looking at this relationship between fat and protein and how much and how to target, like long-term sustainable levels and stuff like that. So to provide actionable type approach. So yeah, look forward to it. Or, you should look forward to it. Probably help demystify a few other things in that way. Who could ever want to down that much offal meat? Exactly. I have heart, kidney, and liver, but my body is quick to let me know my limits. Very much so. Who eats beans and rice? Did I miss something? I must have. Was it that in regards to the guy that actually talking about the DHT? Or yes, a few crackpots out there. Yes, eat more kibble. Look, at the follicle base and all that, you will absorb nutrients, which will support good hair growth and stuff like that. You can, but at the end of the day, fundamentally, if you're putting crap in your body, it's not going to help. And the absorption rate is quite low. So it's really, you really want cleaner washing products. It's more the skin, protecting the skin, the hair follicles and all that and stuff like that. It does, the hair will improve if you give it good nutrition. That is important. So you'll get a lot of split ends and stuff like that. If you cut those off, and as the new hair grows, it will grow lush and good if you've given it more nutrients and all that and done less indiscretions. So, yeah. No cure. That's basically it. Yes, exactly. I wonder what those are. We won't go into it, but I guess he has plenty. In other ways. Yes. Dirty mind. You just went to the gutter like me. I think we've covered that. I remember you said a few months back that scurvy might be more than vitamin C. Are you still checking that out? Scurvy, basically, look, vitamin C under a carnivore diet, under normal conditions, isn't a problem. You get more than enough. You also get hydroxyproline, hydroxylysine. You get a lot of these preformed, the stuff that actually, the sort of things that vitamin C helps in actually bringing about, you already get them in animal foods already formed. So you don't need the vitamin C for that. So when you're on a carnivore diet, since you're getting a lot of the nutrients and also the fat soluble vitamins that are regulating collagen and stuff like that, it's impossible to get scurvy. So the requirements for vitamin C go down quite a bit. It's only on a kibble diet that your requirements for vitamin C and vitamin E go up. So when you're on a low carbohydrate diet, even the small amount of vitamin C you get and the small amount of vitamin E you get, your glutathione gets upregulated when you're in a shallow ketotic or low carb state. And that extra glutathione is a master antioxidant, a very powerful antioxidant, and is a major electron donor. So it is able to basically recycle vitamin C and vitamin E. So the requirements go down. It's only on a kibble diet that is very inflammatory that the requirements go up. So, that is why we notice that it's people on eating kibble that get scurvy. I mean, Napoleon's army actually used to slaughter horses and feed them meat to get rid of scurvy, okay? Because meat has vitamin C. But it was the sailors that were basically eating dried foods, dried carbs, biscuits and stuff like that. They were the ones that were getting scurvy. The officers weren't. They were eating meat. They were getting the better food. So, it's basically a deficiency in a number of things. And it's basically also a higher inflammatory type foods when you're eating more kibble that create these conditions. So a carnivore diet, one, it gives you all the material, the protein, amino acids, and the hydroxyproline, the hydroxylysine in much greater amounts. So you don't need the conversion for those, key elements of collagen. Plus, you've got all the connective tissue and all that already preformed. Eggs, connective tissue and all that, you get that directly. So you don't have, the level of conversion goes down quite a bit because you're getting all this material already there from the animal foods. And so the requirements of vitamin C go down considerably on a species appropriate diet. It's only when you're actually adding kibble that your requirements of vitamin C go up. And that is why you should not supplement on a carnivore diet with the vitamin C, because you'll end up actually creating massive amounts of oxalate. So don't do it, please, unless you want oxalate and painful kidneys. Does drinking a lot of liquid and peeing a lot minerals compared to not drinking a lot of liquids? I don't drink a lot of liquids. So I drink to thirst. I don't drink just for the fun of it. That's no tribal group. Remember tribal groups? You get if you're eating kibble, you're generating less metabolic water. When you're eating animal fats, you're generating more metabolic water. I've discussed this about deuterium depletion and deuterium. 1 gram of water of fat will give you 1.1 mils of metabolic water. That means you get 10% more. When you eat kibble, you only get 0.44. So you are automatically being dehydrated. That means you're only getting 44%, not 110% like with fat. That is why kibble dehydrates, animal fats hydrate. Simple, not complicated. That is why your requirement for water goes down. And also your requirements to deplete deuterium also go down. Healthy on both fronts, increasing energy production and protecting the mitochondria. So, no. And most water has high deuterium. Most tribal populations will take deuterium depleted water from plants. They will take them and actually press on them to get the actual the fluid from the actual plant. That water is deuterium depleted. It's low deuterium water because of UV radiation. It's depleted it. So it's different. And so when those tribal groups that Mary was walking with were using plants to get their water and all that, this is deuterium depleted. When you have tap water, it's 155 pp parts per million, which basically means which is the same as sugar. So it requires higher levels of going through the same process. So no, fat is what hydrates, not water. So when you actually add water, you're actually just increasing the, sometimes when people actually drink too much water, they actually feel dehydrated. Fat hydrates, guys. People did not have this fixation with, when they were eating 50% animal products back in the 50s and 60s and all that, and earlier even more, people were not thirsty like we are today. And then we're having the wrong hydration form. I mean, if you were to buy metabolic water, which is fucking expensive, that's one way of hydrating, or using plant water. The cactus is what the camels use, which is also deuterium depleted. So new in that regard. So eat less kibble and you'll be more hydrated. Yeah, because he's a cockwomble, that's why. Don't listen to these idiots. As I say to these people, I challenge them, show me one fucking study. Not of a polar bear. I mean, obviously a polar bear is very high. And the other thing is, remember, vitamin D also balances out vitamin A. So if you're we've got a population which is highly deficient in vitamin D, and then because they're deficient in everything else, they supplement heavily with all these vitamins, multivitamins. That's not a good idea. So, yeah, crazy situation. We live in a crazy world. Yep. It could be a number of things. It can be basically, as you said, like a sleep. It can basically be things like, fluid, electrolyte issue. It could be, I know that some stress situations can cause some of these things, puffiness and all that, like water retention, eating inappropriately. It's multifaceted in that regard. But when you actually eat a species appropriate diet, a lot of things seem to sort of rebalance themselves without really having to try very hard. Body's a complicated system, and so when you do inappropriate things, different people get affected different ways. So it's hemorrhoid that as well. Shell, you always make me laugh. Thank you. G'day, Honest. Good to see you here. No, we didn't. I didn't. I don't like cooking my. Well, it's a sulfur amino acid, so I tend to have it in a cold type beverage rather than a hot beverage. It probably doesn't really matter that much. It's just what I do. Can I prove either way scientifically? Not really, but I try to prefer having it in a. I just basically put in a bit of water, mix it up with my choline and L-citrulline, mix it up and drink it. Done. So that's how I do it anyway. Small amount of water. Done. I don't complicate things too much. Were extraditionally eaten frequently in British Isles. I suppose ducks, quail, eggs being the most popular. Yeah, look, a different variety of chickens have been around in different areas for some time. So humans have been consuming eggs. Different hominins have been consuming eggs. Even chimps have been found to be consuming eggs. So it's quite widespread. And there's a number of other animals also that consume eggs. So it's a lot of animals, including ourselves, have been consuming eggs for a very long time. Let me put it that way. So, there are some people, for whatever reason, have sensitivity to certain types or whatever. We still don't know exactly why. When we look back in time, we don't really find anything in the literature showing that. So is it a modern day thing, like a lot of other conditions that have emerged, autoimmune conditions and stuff like that, due to poor vitamin D status or other things? I don't know. There's an association, but that's all it is. We've never demonstrated causation or shown or explained mechanism. So, don't know. Hard to say. And the frequency of consumption varies in different parts of the world. Always has, depending on availability and seasonality as well. That's coming up in a future video. You'll have to wait. Hi, Harry. What's your stance on pre-workout meals? Are they necessary? And what would you have normally? I just noticed Lukey. I'll just put him on. Sort of. For me, I exercise at the end if my fast. So with your fast, look, I usually don't have anything before doing any exercise or whatever. I usually do it in a fasted state, and then the first thing that I'll have after that is basically it'll be primarily within about 30 minutes to about an hour, which is the sort of limit that I put on myself. I don't have immediately after I've finished. It's usually about half an hour to an hour, somewhere within there, which is, I think it's the sweet spot in terms of muscle protein synthesis as well. It's when leucine uptake is the highest within that period. So that's probably the best time. I know in the past I used to take whey supplements. In that time, I don't anymore. That's just, we consume far too much. So I'll throw like eggs and dairy, like milk products and stuff like that in that period of time. And then, so it'll be it'll be a dairy, a milk and egg sort of smoothie or something like that, or along those lines. And then right after that, I'll basically have half an hour later, steak and eggs and stuff like that, or may have some seafood as well, or depends on what I feel like meat wise. So sometimes I'll just take out a whole lot, like about 300 grams of which is, what's that? It's about, nearly 11-ish ounces of tuna steaks, and I'll just say, no, I'm just going to binge on tuna steaks and put a bit of butter on top. So yeah, it's just how I feel, whatever. And I'll just use that as high quality protein for my muscles. So that's the sort of my approach anyway. We sort of overthink these things. As long as you're providing enough amino acids, enough protein, and the other thing is, don't fear protein. Even if you consume quite a bit and you go, oh, I'm done and all that. All your peristalsis is going to do is slow down a bit in order to allow you over 6 hours to absorb that. That's the difference between real food. If you have like a lot of these supplements and powders and stuff like that, you'll absorb them much faster, like 3 hours or 4 hours. What do you think happens to most of it? What do you think the level of utilization drops by half compared to real food? So you're actually basically either secreting some of that or turning it into glucose. So do you want that? No. That's why I always stipulate real food, real food, real food. Because it's going to basically have that peristalsis effect, slow down, and it will slowly provide those aminos over a number of hours, which is what you want, that continuous, building of tissue.
There's actually a myth of sorts in the bodybuilding community that you shouldn't have too much protein at once because you won't be able to utilize out of it. But yeah, that's bullshit.
Crap. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. Your small intestine will actually slow down in order to absorb it over more hours. That's absolute bullshit. People don't know. They talk shit. I mean, our ancestors would have died out they binged. They killed an animal and binged on meat, for quite some time. And so then they just sat back and talked and told stories to each other about the great hunt and slowly absorbed all those proteins. Give us a break. It's crap. There's a lot of myths out there and all that. And as I always point to these people, I say, show me mechanism. Because a lot of the stuff, you know what it is? It's all the powders. That's what the studies have been based on the powders. Yeah, they do go quickly in and they can't be utilized. It's like sugar, goes very quickly in. If it's not utilized, it ends up stored fat as triglycerides and stored fat. It's the same sort of thing. And it's high in deuterium because it's processed. And I go, why are you eating that crap? You're paying top dollar for crap. You might as well pay good money for a really good quality protein that is actually going to have higher bioavailability and higher utilization. Because you're getting more, your body will take in more. So the utilization is double. So a protein powder has half the utilization of meat and a third of the utilization of eggs. Bodybuilders in the past knew something. That's why they weren't muscular fat and pumping a whole lot of steroids and all this other stuff. They basically ate high utilization protein, which is basically steak and eggs. And that's why those guys were lean and muscular. Go back, look at the history of bodybuilding. Don't look at the crackpots today that have got no fucking idea about physiology, biochemistry, or how the body works, or what is species appropriate to get good muscular build. All they know to do is pump themselves full of chemicals and create dysmorphic sort of monsters out of themselves. No thanks. And they call that a sport. It's like fucking a whole lot of, it's like on stage, all these fucking monstrous humans deformed and deranged in a number of different ways. Just crazy. What the sport's just degenerated into a joke as far as I'm concerned. And people shouldn't waste their money, time with it because they're putting themselves at harm And most of these sports athletes are actually, I wouldn't even call them sports athletes, but most of these cockwombers are dying in their 30s and 40s. No thanks. So, yeah, bit sidetracked. Sorry about that, Martin. I do get sidetracked sometimes when I hit a raw nerve on certain issues. I drink much coffee with butter and salt, so I drink a lot of cells water. I eat a lot of animal fat, though, too. Depends what you're trying to achieve as well. You know, obviously, if you're trying to lean out, you want to burn more of your own. So you don't want to be doing too much of the butter and stuff like that. I put a bit of cream in my coffee. Should have a bit more. Because the uptake of glucose in the evening is much lower than in the daytime. So I don't want to be, you know, more fat and protein and stuff like that. That's why I'll use that sort of in my coffees. And then in the evening is when I have the milk later, when I've lifted a few weights and stuff like that. That's the only time. Not interested in the earlier. So, but that's, you know, up to people how they want to do it. I mean, I don't tell people how to live their lives in that regard. But whatever you do, there are consequences. Good luck to you. Getting meats, and I'm considering consultations with Bart. No money left. Fair enough. I've never used it, mate. I've got no idea. Maybe it is if she says so. I've couldn't tell you. You know, I've never used it, so I don't know about it. I've never looked into it about hemorrhoid cream. So have fun. It does the opposite. Somebody will be laughing in Ohio. Oh, yes, show me a study that shows some epidemiology. Bart says it much better than me. I just call it junk science.
Yeah.
It's simple. Crap junk science. You know, excrement of the highest order. Ah, yes, Honest is a crypto lady. She's been infected by the necro-kitty virus.
Yes, I joined as well.
Okay, they used it. Oh, there you go. So it has efficacy. Give it a try. Let us know how it works. Is there a amount you should be using, or is it risky to put too much on there, Kate? Yeah, I heard about that he's promoting it. But I think it went up and then came down again and all that. It's biggest problem with these things is they don't have any underlying. I mean, if you get a good ride and then able to get out by dumping it onto someone else, you could make a good profit. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, in terms of when it comes to does it have anything underlying? See, a currency, gold, everything has something underlying. It represents a store of value of the energy potentiality of the system. That means the entire economic system, the assets and the energy that underpins it are actually denominated in, you know, in currency or in these precious metals. So swallowed a bit wrongly, nearly choked myself. It's a family trait, unfortunately. So, yeah. So the thing is, it's not underlined by anything other than basically people supporting it. So as long as people have an interest in it, it will go up. So it's a speculative thing. It's not a sort of a something where you can exchange for real value. If I've got a bar of gold, I can exchange it any time, any place, anywhere. It's going to be honored because, people see an intrinsic value in it. If I've got a piece of land, it's got an intrinsic value in it. If I've got a piece of, like a home or whatever, it's got an intrinsic value in it. What these things don't have is an intrinsic value. It's basically what the people who are investing in it, how they value it, and the supply and demand and scarcity of it that pushes the price up. But if a whole lot of people end up going for the door, it'll collapse to nothing. So it is very speculative and very volatile in that regard. So if you get into that sort of environment, got to be careful what you're doing. Very careful. I've played with speculative stuff as well, and I've also won and got burnt. So believe me. You can't, even the smartest person can't control the future, how it's going to play out. So don't put all your eggs in one basket is what I'm trying to say. You go first. You guys are so nice. Go first. You fight that competition. I think Conan O'Brien said his makeup PPLs on his always use pre. Okay. I've no idea why I retain that. Can't tell you either. A ban. Yes, we hope she does. Never become too greedy, honest, because that's when you get undone. That's one thing I've learned in life. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Never become too greedy. What's good for sagging skin elasticity? Laugh lines in 20-something carnivore. You that young, mate. Fuck. Have you been on a kibble diet in the past, I suspect, to have those sort of issues at that young age? I would say, if you increase your animal protein sources and your fat-soluble vitamins and B vitamins and all that, and deal with any underlying problem, this will just naturally sort of sort itself out. A lot of people, some people have actually put increased, like their spine has actually, with more protein, has improved, and they've actually put on height. Where they had degenerative disc disease and now they don't. Remember, your bones are basically mineralized protein. I've been telling you for years. It's all collagen, And when you generate too much matrix metalloproteinases, you will break that down. And that's when you're eating appropriately. You'll generate more of those. When you've got fat-soluble vitamins, you will decrease these things and regulate them properly. I even watched recently, even Paul Mason is actually talking about MMPs, which is good that it's starting to get out there. More people are talking about them. When I sort of first started talking about them, I don't think there was anybody on YouTube that was actually talking about them. This was before I had the YouTube channel when I was talking to Bart, but nobody else was, back a couple of years back was talking about MMPs, but now more people are talking, which is good. They're starting to understand the connection between nutrition and the way the body remodels itself. And that's what we're talking about, body remodeling. It takes about 7 years to rebuild your body. And remember, it also takes about 4 to 7 years to get rid of all the PUFA crap that's stored in there with a low-dose vitamin E, which I've talked about. So depending on what your past indiscretions, and that can actually damage as well, your collagen, all that crap coming out as free fatty acids as you're losing weight. So you have to have that that low-dose vitamin E, that E complex. So there's a lot of things, it's complicated. But when you basically have sufficient protein, sufficient good nutrition, keep the crap out, your body will naturally rebuild itself correctly, And you even notice people that had narrowing faces, actually their faces start remodeling again and becoming wider on a carnivore diet. All these things happen, but it's not going to happen instantly, John. The carnivore diet is not a miraculous diet. You don't bow down to the gods of meat and actually get transformed within seconds. It takes time. If you've been doing inappropriate things for some time, it will take some time to restore good cellular and function, and also the remodeling that is required. So be patient, eat more meat. Sort of. When I'm talking about, I may consume some discretionary carbohydrates around summer. So within that sort of month, which is at the end of summer, early autumn, I may have the occasional, like yesterday, had about some berries. So a small handful, wasn't a lot, but it's still carbohydrate. So, but that's my only day of indiscretions, which is a Saturday, as everybody knows, my ice cream day and all that. And so my mate Sean threw a couple of berries on. He said, "You don't mind?" I said, "Oh yeah, now that you've thrown them on, I'll have them." So that was basically it. How that all happened. But he didn't throw too many on. He said, "I didn't throw too many on." I said, "Is that because you want to eat more of them?" I said to him. He goes, "No, you're not supposed to eat them anyway." And I go, "Okay." So along those lines, in that regard, I usually have these conversations about carbs and all that sort of stuff with my friends because they know me, so they'll bag me. Yeah, but look, traditionally we did eat seasonally. If you're depleting now, I'm out in the sun, constantly depleting deuterium from these sources of kibble, or let's say some fruit and stuff like that. So it's going to be less problematic, but I would not consume this in winter. No fucking way. And if it was put into I would take it out. I'm very strict when it comes to winter. So yeah, in that regard, seasonally, yeah, I may have some indiscretions through the summer period when I can deplete deuterium, but I'm very particular about it when winter hits. When it's the colder periods of the year and I'm not getting enough UV, pretty much all that gets cut out. I mean, I'm really ruthless about it. And I need to, and that means including ice cream. So I need to basically get my fucking recipe on my ice cream that failed last week corrected. Otherwise, I won't be having any ice cream in winter. So, yeah, I've got no option. But I'll take that sort of stuff out. So it's about 2 or 3 months of indiscretions through the warmer months, and that's about it. And what I'm talking about is the Saturday. I'm not talking about all week. I'm just talking about the Saturday that I'm actually doing that indiscretion. So that's about it. I don't eat rice. I don't eat tubers. I don't eat green leafies. Actually, it's garbage. You know, and the only things, my only indiscretion is a bit of fruit and a bit of ice cream. That's about it. It's low sugar ice cream, but it's still a commercial based low sugar ice cream. It's dairy based, but it's, you know, it's still something that I need to transition away from in that regard. So I'm still working on my recipe to try and get it right. So I said I'm going to do another test, and Lynn gave me her xylitol, and I did a bit of an experimentation with that. It still didn't really work out the way that I wanted it. So I had to go. I gave it back to her last night. I popped in and she didn't want to help with some other bloody thing, so I helped her out with that as well. And then, yeah, so that's pretty much me. Is it seasonal? One day on a Saturday? I don't know if you want to call it seasonal. It's up to people whether they want to call it that. But I limit really my carbohydrates nowadays for reasons of longevity. At the end of the day, I like to run at a lower level of deuterium personally. So I'm not going to do that if I'm basically consuming a lot. You know, here's the advantage. Summer, you can deuterium deplete much better. Why not utilize that advantage? Why lose it? So that's my sort of approach in that regard. Yeah, pretty much. You definitely got a fan there with trouble. Good to see you, trouble. She's always good value. Is calcium to phosphorus ratio important or more reductionism? More reductionism, mate. More reductionism. You know, I hear this constantly about phosphorus. Too much phosphorus. Too much this. Too much. Remember that experiment that I've talked about? I need to do that video as well. That's another little irritating issue that I need to cover as well, which basically, you know, you can take calcium away. You're not going to get a lot of bone loss or stuff like that, or muscle loss. You can take a lot of things away or reduce them. You reduce phosphorus or protein or salt, and I can tell you, you will lose muscle and bone mass. And that's clinical, where they intravenously put these things in and remove them. So that is basically replicatable. That is actual mechanistic proof that if you take phosphorus out, it's garbage. Again, reductionism, nonsense, absolute repeat nonsense, and people like that, absolute crackpots. You know, they're actually putting people at risk with this sort of encouraging people for higher calcium to phosphorus ratios. Absolute fucking crackpots. You know, this is what will create brittle bones, and also will actually create weaker, you know, people in general. Fucking crackpots. They got no idea. I mean, we've seen all the garbage, you know, years and years of people consuming large amounts of calcium, ending up with cardiovascular disease, and also with more, you know, with more vulnerability to sarcopenia and all these other things, and having hip fractures and breaking, you know, bones and all this sort of stuff. Hasn't worked. Why? Because phosphorus, protein, and salt are necessary. Even within the actual, your mitochondria in the fluid, there's actually salt there. And without sufficient salt, you basically can't produce energy well enough. So it's nonsense Salt is so essential. Now, some people may have salt retention, all sorts of issues because of high insulin or a whole lot of other reasons, but that doesn't mean that salt isn't essential, So that means they've got some derangement that needs to be sorted, but that's not the same thing to then in a reductionist way to say, oh, salt's bad. That's what they did. So we need to basically move away from reductionism. The body's a much more complicated place and actually adjust things in a whole lot of different ways because they are physiologically required to do. The body does these adjustments, like I talked about the thyroid, and I talked about the, how these hormones adjust depending on when they're out of whack, they adjust differently. When they're in normal physiological, moving between different states, they adjust appropriately. So we need to avoid reductionism because these people use reductionism then to argue their misanthropic bullshit. And that's what happens, unfortunately. And as I say to them, you show me a study where high phosphorus or high meat consumption actually reduces bone density and muscle and breaks down muscle or bone. You show me one fucking study. There's none. Never will be. Even the rats. Remember the one that I did on rats? The little rats were basically tiny fucking frail. And the one on protein was lean and mean and strong and randy, And that basically rat was, could kick ass. What was that on? High phosphorus to calcium diet, wasn't it? Had more phosphorus than calcium in its diet. A whole lot of meat. So, as I said, bones are mineralized protein. The scaffolding of your bone is collagen. What do you think it needs? Protein. I mean, when a child is born as a child, its legs are not mineralized. And so you can actually twist their legs and all that. They're very flexible. That's why they can actually climb better than adults, the kids, because of the flexibility of their joints. Then they mineralize as they get older and more compression force actually mineralizes them and hardens them, stiffens them. That's good to be able to carry much more weight as you get older. But at the same time, that mineralized bone still needs good protein to be maintained. If you take away the bone, the protein, the bones, the minerals will start breaking up within that matrix. And then you get brittleness and bones that can snap very easily. Eat your fucking meat, as I've been telling you, and you'll be fine. And stop listening to crackpot pseudoscience, because that's what it is. It's pseudoscience. They do some experiments in a lab in a very reductionist way, and they say, oh, look what's happening. Completely out of physiological context within an actual body of a person. Or eating inappropriate things that actually causes some derangement to these processes, and then accusing, like they do with meat, oh, we're going to stick a whole lot of fructose in there and a whole lot of carbohydrates and a whole lot of seed oils, and then we're going to blame the meat in the actual meat patty. That's exactly the same thing that they do. They do these stupid, reductionist, nonsensical experiments where they show association and they go, oh, look, it must be this. So it can't be the other things. We know they're okay. Opinions over opinions and speculations. It's garbage. And that's the same sort of garbage that Ray Peat and his mob peddle continuously. That's why I try to show the contradictions. All I have to demonstrate is one contradiction to prove him wrong. That's what I do. And then I put the argument back to them and say, you prove me mechanism, show me mechanism. They can't. They can only reductionist speculation. That's all they've got. That is why they wouldn't last very long in a debate with me or Bart, because we would take them to hand and we would tear them a new arsehole so fast, Yeah. I don't know, and it probably wouldn't put a smile on their face. Yes. Sorry about the colourful language, ladies. They do piss me off, these people. Really piss me off.
I share sentiments, Harry.
Yeah, thanks. I guess that MSM sulfur that Harry talks about, did he could be the good skin as well, besides hair, collagen to maybe moisturize. It's a combination. I suspect it has some value, yes. Shell loves when I talk tough and dirty, I suspect as well. Thank you, Shell. Any decent makeup opinions? Look, guys, I don't use anything on my skin. I use zero. I don't buy anything and stuff. I just buy soap and I use soap. I don't even use shampoo. I use soap for my whole body. I don't put anything in my hair, any conditioners or anything. Absolutely nothing. I think massaging is a good thing for good circulation. I think there's a number of exercises, yoga and other things that can help with better circulation. I use a rolling pin as well to increase circulation and to also allow muscles to untense and stuff like that. So, yeah, a lot of that stuff is good. I do occasionally go for a massage and get somebody to, and when I'm in Southeast Asia, because they're cheaper, I usually have a massage nearly once or twice a day sometimes. I really spoil myself. Oops. Ah, yes, exactly. Let's just ram in the kibble. Get that kibble in. We need that kibble. Protein is not enough. Oh, we need the kibble. Oh, there's no way muscle protein synthesis is going to happen naturally as it's been happening for millions and millions of years. All those rats that bulked up and became that became very bulky and strong. No. We need the carbohydrates. We need insulin way, way, way up. Yes, I know it's crazy, Kate, isn't it? We live in a fucking crazy, nonsensical world. Might slow roasting, boiling be superior to pan frying? What do you think, Lukey?
Slow roasting, yeah. Well, I think it depends on what group of nutrients you're looking at, but personally, I would say that when I do pan frying, I have greater control of how the steak ends up cooked. So I would say it's better on that basis, but yeah, I think there's a lot of variables, I guess.
Yeah, slow roasting isn't too bad either. Boiling can be an issue if you throw out the water. You could lose a lot of minerals.
Yes, that's true.
So my father does boil, but he drinks all the juices. He doesn't throw them away.
Yeah.
So that's a critical component, And
sure.
Sometimes even when he boils and he's done something, he'll put it back in and with some vegetables and stuff like that, because he still eats that sort of stuff. He'll mix it up and actually cook it all together. And then, so nothing is lost in that regard. But obviously, I do it different ways. For me, depends. It'll vary from barbecued to roasting to basically just oven baking quickly, to basically like on a tray in the oven. So sometimes if I want, that like caramelization, it depends what I want to do, sometimes basically I will wrap it up in baking paper and put it on a tray and cook it at high temperature so it doesn't get burnt on the outside. And then for a short amount of time, like, 10, 15 minutes or whatever, usually about 10 minutes, then take it out. And so it has to be cooked on the outside. It's just got that light sort of change, and inside it's just, you know, very on the raw side, or, you know, very rare in that regard. And then, you know, I'll fry up an egg, throw it on top, and it's still, you know, the yolk is still quite fluid, hasn't sort of solidified, and that will just break up and sort of just intermix with a bit of salt and pepper. So it depends. I varied ways. I don't do much boiling. It's usually when I'm souping or stuff like that. So the only time I will boil is when I make a soup type thing with an egg and meat soup, and then I'll combine that in there. So it'll be, yeah, I vary things. Yes, they could definitely. Correct, Dunning. That's basically, they could, and very much so. As I said, peristalsis is a great thing. You know, as long as you're not consuming refined stuff. Whenever you refine anything, whether it's a protein powder, anything is refined, the absorption happens very rapidly. And if the body can't enzymatically deal with it so rapidly, it will store it as fat or have to try and excrete some of it. So at the end of the day, when you're actually having real food, like real meat, it will basically absorb, you know, over many hours, which is great. And that's true. They didn't eat every day. That's true. They were on forced fasts, whether they liked it or not, depending on the season. Some seasons, some parts of the year, they actually consumed every day. But in some parts of the year, they didn't. Just the availability of stuff, accessibility varied. So it was very much a seasonal thing as well. But they did get some level of fasting or time-restricted feeding through their days. That's true. I mean, they would wake up. You don't have a fridge. Obviously, you got to go out and find the food. So by the time you find the food, it's midday. So you've time-restricted feeding already. Then when you find the food, you'll have a snack. Then you'll get back to the actual tribe. Then you'll cook it all up, and then you'll feast, you know, for an hour, maybe two. And after that, you'll sit back and tell stories about, you know, the hunt and other things like that, and just basically over multiple hours, you'll slowly digest all that sort of stuff, and then go to bed and repeat. And that's how pretty much humanity lived for a very long time. So yes, there's a lot of truth in that, time-restricted feeding and all this sort of stuff. But even when they do eat a lot of the different foods, the way they eat and all that keeps insulin and, to a very much lower level, blood sugars, so much ketones at that low grade level, like Mary noticed. That's one thing I loved about Mary, that she went there and she took a whole lot of kits with her, and actually tested every single Maasai. So she had enough pins so she could actually change them, so you don't blood-borne diseases and all that sort of stuff. So he had enough to basically prick every Maasai in these different villages and basically get all these readings on a daily basis, and, you know, to see where they were. And they were consistently at that low-grade ketosis, low-level ketones, you know, and at the same time, that low normal blood sugar. It was only one of the tribal people, one of the actual chiefs, that had really high blood sugar. If you remember, the Hudzas, who basically was consuming a lot of westernized crap that was being brought in by the tourists. Being the tribal leader, he had more access to that sort of stuff. He was the one getting into trouble without knowing it. Yes. So it's very much, and that's the sort of, that's why when I got Mary on, I asked the specific questions like that, because nobody else asked these questions. These are the nuggets of gold that actually give you insights. Talking in general, like everybody else does, is, I sometimes find very boring. As I say, the devil is in the details. Understanding how a tribe really operates, functions, lives, and all that is looking at the details, not looking at, oh, they eat this sort of stuff. Yeah, whoopee do. How do they eat it? What times do they eat it? What are their practices? Now, we know that they don't eat, the Maasai don't consume milk, dairy foods with meat on the same day. Prior to that, we didn't know until Mary saw this happening and actually recorded it properly and correctly, because she's a details person as well, like me. And so she didn't, all these research, they go there, you're like, even Salad Boy, he would have gone there, oh, they do this, that, and that, wrote it down in general and just talked in general, no specifics. She went there, measured things, specifically worked out exactly what they were doing in detail, so she could record these things for posterity and then come back and say, this is what these people do. And she had more interaction with these people. Remember, she's also got an organization where she's, getting donations to try and provide them with animals and all sorts of things. So she's heavily involved with these people. This is not like somebody turning up, being a tourist occasionally. She's involved with these people. She's got associations and relationships. So she's been going back and forward from Athens to parts of Africa and interacting with these people and learning about all sorts of things on a constant basis. It's not like a Salad Boy turns up for a couple of days, asks for specific things to be given, because that's his narrative. So he says, oh, look what they're giving me, and then goes back and talks shit. And that's why I didn't want to stay and actually have a further conversation. I think he realizes that that Mary and some of the others, want to do real proper stuff and not push any bullshit propaganda, but what they observe, record it properly and tell the rest of everyone else. And that's what we really need, because then we can base some on real, proper, recorded information. And that's what, that's why I love her. She's fantastic in that regard. She's a woman after my own heart in that regard, that at the end of the day, as I said, if ice cream basically gave me longevity, I'd be eating ice cream every fucking day. I'm not welded to the carnivore diet, but when I've looked at the evidence, the N14, N15 data, ancestral data, and everything else, why would I change my mind? The only thing that is left for me is really to nuance some of this stuff, to work out some of the details and stuff like that, and the importance. Oops, a bit of good. Somebody sorted out ban. So that's the sort of stuff. Harry, did you happen to see some institute report regarding spike protein vaccine and artery damage? No, I didn't. So, but as far as I'm concerned, spike proteins are not the problem. We basically take proteins in a deactivated form from different diseases, and then like the flu vax and stuff like that. I recently did the flu vax, and that's a traditional way. You take it, you incubate it, you create all the a big viral load of the spikes in a deactivated form, and then you insert it in the person, and you get a proper immune response. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not sure what you actually mean. Now, if it's the AstraZeneca or the Pfizer or stuff like that, do not touch those. They are bad. One thing, what they do is they stick the spike. They are basically getting the system to replicate inside your cells these proteins and incorporate themselves in a sense, especially the Pfizer. That's a problematic thing, and then can create autoimmune sort of responses. We've seen that in the cancer research or where it was used. So they didn't make enough money, and that's why they ported it over to this industry, the vaccine industry, with the and what they did was they created a product, and they've recouped a lot of their profits. They've made shitloads of money on this, so it's been a great winner for them, not for the rest of us. Now the other one, in terms of the issue clotting and stuff like that, when we're talking about the AstraZeneca, that actually uses a virus, an adenovirus. Now, adenoviruses we have human forms. You get them at birth from your mother. And those adenoviruses, if you've got a weakened immune system and they operate, can cause clotting factors. It's well researched in the literature. So I have no idea why they used a monkey adenovirus in order, as a vehicle, to put a spike protein and get it to replicate in our bodies, to replicate this deactivated spike protein. Why use that method? That's, but that's what they did. And I think, and that's why these clotting issues are coming up. And it's not only that one, even the Johnson & Johnson uses the same technology, same issues. So the only one that I would see, what they've actually done, this other company, the Novavax one, what they've done is they've actually got a protein spike, put it on a virus, but they didn't put it in humans. They put it in moths. Okay? Now, in the moth, like you would take, the system in an egg, when it comes to basically the flu vax, you allow it to replicate in something else. And then what you do is you collect all the proteins, the deactivated proteins that have been basically generated in another medium other than your own body. So you're not using the body to generate these spike proteins, but you're using basically some other vector. In this case, they're using the Novavax, I suspect, because they don't want to have any egg-related, anaphylactic issues. So they're using moths. And so they're breeding them in moths, all these, they're growing them in moths, and then basically they're removing them from the moth, and they are basically then have got the spike proteins, just the spike proteins in a deactivated form, no different than basically a flu vax, and then they inject that into you and you get an immune response. And so that is, as I said, that is technology that we've used a very long time, and that's the safest. That is similar to the flu vax. So that's fairly safe. So if you're going to use any method, that's the one. I wouldn't use some of the other methods because they've got too many bloody issues, So, yeah, that's my sort of take on that, if you have to use it. But at the end of the day, Novavax won't be available until towards the end of the year. So what do you do until then? Beef up your vitamin D. That's the best protection against respiratory infections, And if you want to take the Novavax, take it. If you don't want to, just keep your vitamin D status up. That's up to you what you want to do. I'll probably take the Novavax, and the only reason for that is so it makes it easier to travel. But I'm definitely not taking the Pfizer and putting myself at risk, and I'm definitely not taking the AstraZeneca to put myself at risk. No, thank you. Now, if somebody's taken the AstraZeneca for a month, you should be on blood thinners. And if you're not, like on aspirin or something like that, why aren't you? So that's one thing. Now, the other one, you need to be on good doses of vitamin D for some time to prevent a potential risk of a cytokine storm or some sort of incident in the future. Now, will that happen? I don't know. Will that happen to everyone? Possibly not. It'll happen to a small minority. But do you know whether you're going to be in that minority? I don't know. Could some people get more autoimmunity than others? Potentially. With high vitamin D status, would that mitigate it? There's a strong possibility. When it comes to a lot of autoimmune diseases, vitamin D tends to basically fix most of those problems, as Lukey would know. Exactly. So his Hashimoto's is more or less gone. Yes. So, yeah. Did you actually end up doing your test recently, or what's happened? Or not yet?
Not yet, but I finally have some time, and I'm just looking around because...
But basically, you don't have the symptoms anymore.
No. It's like I've said this before, but it's like I'm a completely different person, and I can tell because when I started having the onset of the symptoms, it was like I became moody, and I had no attention, and I was irritable all the time, and it was very noticeable.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Look, I think basically with the high vitamin D and getting rid of the kibble and reorientating, I think you've probably fixed your Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease. So the combo is perfect. I always say you want to fix autoimmunity, eat meat and sunbake.
yeah,
So
indeed. Well, can I just say something else, Harry?
yep, go right ahead.
Just to keep people updated, I think I'll be getting a test in the next following weeks. I just need to figure out where my health insurance plan, where I can actually go over here in this city,
Okay.
because elsewhere it's kind of expensive to get your blood tested. And I think I also need to get another consultation with my doctor, even though he said I could only go. I only needed to go back there a year later. I think I actually need another one because the dosage of my medicine may actually need to be brought down.
Yeah, you definitely, because you don't want to end up with like hyperthyroidism or something like that.
Yes.
So you definitely want to basically get off the meds and you want to be tested. So tell him you're feeling very different. I need to be tested. I need to know if my adjustment to my medication is required. And then it's a medical thing, which is covered because the doctor's actually, so put the screws on him, pressure him. Or consider a new physician. It's up to you.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about as well.
I'd tell him, I'd say, look, if I want to know where I'm at. If you're not prepared to do that, I may have to look at elsewhere.
Yes. I'll tell him that.
Good. Nah, not really. John, not an issue. MK4 is not an issue. It doesn't seem to have any toxic upper limit that I've actually seen in any literature whatsoever. They've actually tried to give people doses which are way beyond what anyone would supplement, and still they couldn't find a toxicity. So I would say no. Should be taken forever. Depends on what you're. Are you eating enough eggs? Are you eating some organ meats? So organ meats are high in taurine. In MK4, and so are eggs. So are certain seafoods. So I don't know if you're only eating steaks and you're not eating some variety and other things. Probably yes. So it depends. What's your underlying status? Has it been low for a number of years? Then probably you need a decade to be on good levels of MK4 because you're remodeling your body, and you may need extra of those fat soluble vitamins to basically to help with that remodeling. And then after that, you can say, yep, now I'll give it up and I'll get it from the diet. Because you'll basically get to a much healthier state, your body, your physiology, and then your requirements for vitamins, minerals, and all these sort of things comes down because you're not inflamed anymore, you don't have issues and all that. So the requirements come down, and so what you're getting from the diet is more than enough, like a tribal person. But as I said, we are all damaged people. Like, people like Terry Walsh, who was basically, had MS. She had to eat a lot of organ meats and a lot of things like that, nutrient-dense stuff, in order to sort out the deficiencies. So that's what I'm saying. You're at a different point. Whether forever, possibly not. Taurine is a different thing. Even taurine, to some extent. Do you need to take high doses for the rest of your life? Possibly not. Once you basically, if you've got you maintain a meat-heavy diet going on in the future, once you've actually gone through the decade period, you probably don't. I mean, I've come down now a bit, but for me, because I've got quite a bit of damage. I didn't get cardiovascular disease at mid-40s without that. So, I've sort of got, my aim is to at least 2 to 3 decades to basically guarantee that things are good. Plus, I don't want to lose my marbles, and I know that taurine helps with breaking down beta amyloid. So I'm sort of saying, well, I've done a lot of damage over a number of decades. Wouldn't it be a good idea to basically try and actually clear out that, because it's going to take a number of decades to get rid of? So maybe I need it where a tribal person doesn't. I'm not willing to take the risk of saying I'm going to, I'll do it for a decade, and that is, I'll do it a bit longer. I just lowered slightly the dose from 5 grams to 3 grams of taurine. So that's the only difference that I've done, but it's still there. It's still there. The choline is still there, 1 gram. I was doing 3, it's down to 1 now. When it came to, sulfur and all that, I lowered that back to 1 gram. When it comes to citrulline, I lowered that to 1 gram. When it comes to general exercise and all that, I usually boost it up to 3 grams when I'm pre-sex, pre-half an hour. So, but that's for a different reason altogether. That's Harry's Viagra.
But
anyway,
you were mentioning taurine. I had my parents visit earlier today, and my mom, she was being humorous with me. She was like, "Look at my teeth," and she was like, her teeth were like black and stuff. She was swallowing a like iron supplement, and I'm like, yeah. I nearly said something then, but I just kept quiet. And then I told her, there's this thing called taurine. I think you should get some, and I think it would help you. And I think I'll actually buy some supplements for her and there. Yeah.
It helps with iron issues as well. You've seen my video on that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it would be helpful in that regard. Very important. I've talked about I need to do a video on the rhamnosus that I used for my gut issues as well, because it was rhamnosus, the Ruteri. I just haven't got around doing that video, but that's another one that I need to do. Some of this stuff is very important as well, sorting out the gut. As I said a while back, about 90% of your signaling comes from your gut to your brain through the vagus nerve. So, and we know even bacteria can move up the vagus nerve. We've actually seen it. They've actually done like MRIs and actually seen it move, so we know it happens in that regard. So it's very important to sort out the, sort of the gut issues as well for a number of people. It's the reason why they store iron, things that I've talked about on a number of occasions. But that's why I did those quick videos today, because, it was sort of general conversation that I know Paul was basically talking about a lot of the actual medicalized sort of approaches. Oh, we need to do this and that and whatever. I'm going, let's sort out the problem actually at the root cause, and stop worrying about the using all these systems to basically measure it. I don't, once you know you've got an underlying, your ferritin's up, fix the gut. That's the approach. My approach is, and then basically, then your body will no longer say, "Oh, I don't have a pathogenic state. I can release that iron for the person." And this is what traditionally a tribal person may have got an infection or whatever. The shaman would have given them some sort of herbal remedy or whatever to increase certain bacteria and all that, to suppress that thing. And then the actual meat products, that you're eating, you've got basically a more acidic stomach that kills these things off. You've got basically bile that actually is properly flowing. You don't have bile, gallbladder issues. Your bile is flowing every day because you're eating species appropriate. So you don't get any of these issues with gallbladder issues, use it or lose it, as I say. And then that cleanses the small intestine. So it gets rid of the nasties that shouldn't be there, and also reduces some of the nasties in the colon as well, because you're getting some of the beneficial stuff being supported with the B vitamins coming from the animal foods that are high in B vitamins, and you're out in the sun. So you're getting enough, as a tribal person, you're getting enough sun. So you're getting enough vitamin D, which also supports those beneficial bacteria to keep things in homeostasis in the gut. So there's all these sort of things, and it takes time. As I say to people, you've got to be patient, and it takes time to fix these things. Took me some time as well. And there was a lot of trial and error and things that didn't work, and I'm scratching my head why they're not working. So, yes, I used to have a lot of gut issues, and I would take like weeks off from work because I had such bad gut issues. I suffered quite a bit. I had some of the highest, in one period, some of the highest sort of sick leave because of gut issues. And I hardly have any, so I'm one of the lowest now users of sick leave. That should tell you something, so exactly. Can grass-fed land animals give us enough DHA? Is fatty fish necessary? The size seem good without fishing. That's true. They will get basically from two sources, both from the meat and from the dairy. So they're getting it from both sources and all that. And obviously they're not pasteurizing the living daylights out of these things and causing damage to these things. So that's another important thing. The other thing, guys, that I did notice, I'll just put that on for a sec. I'll pin that. So that's Bart's Discord. Great value. Yeah. Great value, guys.
I was inviting over a few people, and someone asked me about my Hashimoto's history, and I'm like, I'm not going to take the spotlight here. I'll mention it one day if it is the proper time. But, if you want to know about it, we can talk it over there.
Yep. And also, let me just find this. Oops. And there's my featured ones down here. There's the Institute of Scientific Integrity. Why haven't more people subscribed? Guys, go and subscribe. There's good information here. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should subscribe. This is one that it's going to be very sort of no TED, no indiscretion, no comedy, no nothing. It's just clear. That's the link to it down there. So people should subscribe. Bart's putting more material on that. So he's got on the major flaws of epidemiology, which was his first one. The red meat and metabolic dysfunction was the next one, which is another good one. The Randall cycle. Then he's got the low carb and mortality stuff. So he goes through the research and all that and shows how these people are trying to pull the wool over our eyes. And sort of this is the recent one, Carnivore Aurelius and all the repeat crack pottery shit. So he's done, and he's gone through that manifesto that he actually put in and all that. Sort of thing. It's what motivated me, because somebody asked me a question, as I said, which was Latin Carnivore, he wasn't clear about something in regards to that's what prompted me to do that video on Ray Peat and stuff like that, just to clear up. I used non-sciencey language. I just basically kept it very basic in order to basically make it accessible for everyone, just in case they didn't understand all the stuff. Because what Bart was doing was going through to sort of look at all the elements, what these people were saying, and then just say, well, this physiologically is ridiculous. It's incorrect. It's not even in the literature. You won't, if you open up a book of biochemistry or physiology, it just does not happen this way. It's like the stuff that I pointed out, but in a more basic way. This can't work because that is that mechanism. If it worked differently, you'd waste away, or this would happen. So it clarifies things. He went through their points. What I did was I sort of touched on more what the Ray Peat sort of people usually peddle, some of that stuff, and sort of focused on that specific area because that was the one thing that was brought up by the Latin Carnivore. So that's why I answered it specifically skewed to that, to his specific question in that regard. But Bart goes into more detail on the Carnivore Aurelius sort of BS manifesto. So go check it out, guys. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you haven't checked it out, go and check it out. There's really good information there, and it really will clarify certain things. So when you hear the Ray Peat crackpottery shit, you'll basically say, oh yeah, I heard Bart say that about it. That's wrong for this reason. So it will clarify things, because I've touched a bit on it and I've talked a bit in my live streams, but sometimes you may have not made the connection with all the points of what the Ray Peat people put out. And so go and check this stuff. It's, this is valuable information for anybody that wants to, understand why these crackpots are wrong. Anyway, so now you know where to go. And yes, it's the closer and personal. Yeah, I think I sort of covered that. You will get from dairy and animal foods. Your liver as well has more essential fatty acids as well. So yeah, organ meats in general. So that's another good source, and they do consume organ meats. Bart prefers getting his from fish rather than organ meats because he doesn't like organ meats. That's him. Each to their own. Pim does like organ meats, but Bart doesn't. Pim likes raw meats, Bart doesn't. So they do have, and these are preferences, obviously.
It's funny how a lot of people were slandering Bart on the internet because, he eats overcooked meat and things like that. It's like, look, it's what he's like. He likes. He's not like promoting or saying it's the best for everyone.
Exactly.
I don't get why people criticize him because of...
Exactly. That's exactly right. Exactly. It has nothing to do. He's not arguing that cooking meat is superior. He actually says it's not the best thing to do, but that's how I like it. So there is a difference. It's like basically I say, this is what the literature says, but I have an indiscretion, which is ice cream. I'm not promoting ice cream, but I'm saying that is my indiscretion. It's not a promotion of ice cream. It's just basically I do this naughty little thing called ice cream eating on a Saturday. I'm not telling you to do that. I would encourage you not to do that. But at the same time, I do that because I'm just being honest with you. And that's how Bart just tells you, if he's done something, he says, this is what I did. I fell off the wagon, had a few drinks and had a pizza. He won't lie to you. I won't. I'll tell you, when I've had my little indiscretions. There's nothing wrong with we're human. We're human. We're weak sometimes. We can be stressed because of family issue, a whole lot of things, and we can fall off the wagon. We can do things. You know, it's only people that lie to you, put a facade on, tell you they're perfect. You know, if you believe that everybody's perfect in this world, God, do I have a whole lot of bullshit to sell you? Because you're very gullible. Then the reality is none of us are. You know, but that doesn't, just because I do something in indiscretion doesn't negate the science. Doesn't negate the archaeology. The science is what it is. It's science. It's proven. It's, you know, something that's replicatable. I can do an experiment. Somebody else can do the same experiment and get the same result. That's replicatable truth. It doesn't negate any of that. You know, what we do as humans, we're not perfect. We are fallen creatures, which basically do a lot of indiscretions. What are your thoughts on the fire in a bottle, the Brad Marshall croissant diet? Sounds like it's nutrient dense stuff. Sounds like bullshit. Yes, he probably is, Kate. He probably is.
I had to go training today. That's why I look extra tired.
Maybe, Harry, do HCl and the digestive bile supplements need to be taken much earlier than the meal, or is it okay to take while eating? Just before eating is fine. Just before eating, you know, you don't have to take it hours before or half an hour or whatever. Just prior to eating is probably just the easy sort of stuff. And hopefully, you know, as your digestion improves and all that, it should basically sort itself out over, you know, within a certain amount of time. It takes a while, you know. Taurine plays a big role in sort of clearing out that crap out of your, out of your bile ducts. So, you know, I've still got a bit of sludge. I don't have any gallstones, but I do have a bit of sludge, you know. And so, you know, normally I'm fine, you know, days, and then occasionally once in a blue moon, in 2 months later, you know, something happened. I go, okay, and I've realised it. So I'm still cleaning up and correcting things as well. So don't, it takes time. You've got to be patient with these sort of things. You know, we've done as I said, a lot of damage. You know, for me to get to where I was, I did a lot of damage. And I'm cleaning up things. And as I'm cleaning up, and I do a bit of trial and error, and I make mistakes and fix them and all that and improve on them, you get the benefit. You don't have to suffer like I did. So you get the benefit of, my own experiences. Having knowledge about, biochemistry or biophysics and all that doesn't actually make you an expert in how to, treat conditions. You either have to be a physician that basically deals with clients that have got these issues, and then trial and error, trying different things to try and get things to sort themselves out, or somebody that suffered and worked out a protocol that actually works for them and potentially is applicable to others as well, since we're all human. That's how it sort of works. Exactly. As much as you can afford to lose. That is exactly it. No more. Ah, yes, exactly, Shell. You got to take a risk now and then, otherwise you don't get anywhere in life. And life would be too boring as well. God, if you'd never took a risk. I mean, even, starting a YouTube thing and getting on this is taking a bit of a risk. You're exposing yourself or whatever to ridicule, potentially. polemics, attacks. They're all risks. Yeah, exactly, Kate. Yeah. A lot of people have noticed things improve. I mean, I used to have a much more narrower face, and also I had more a drawn-in face, in a sense, and that's sort of come out a bit as well. It's improving. So I've noticed a bit of a difference myself. It's only been a couple of years, so that's good. It usually will take a bit more with higher protein. It takes a bit, the whole body to remodel. You're looking at about 5 to 7 years before you notice substantial differences. So the younger you are, it happens a bit faster. Yes, again, the other advantage of youthfulness. Another reason to hate young people. Is that what I'm saying? No. I wouldn't have Lukey on if that was the case.
Hey.
Harry, do you have another name or nickname in Greek, or were you always Harry? No, actually, it's Harilaos. Harry Laos. So that's my grandfather's name. But for short, it's Harry, and that's what I use, even at work, Harry Serpanos. So that's how people know me. Oh, there's a few that know me as Harilaos, know my grandfather's or baptized name. And it's actually, it's not even a Christian name. It's actually an ancient Greek name. So it means for the joy of the people, or something along those lines. Depends where you put the comma. It can be for the people's joy, or the joyousness of the people, or stuff like that. It depends how you put it, because with ancient Greek, you can change the meaning where you put the commas. That changed with the Hellenistic Greek, but the earlier stuff was a bit different in that regard. So they had double meanings. Good for the oracle, because you never knew where the oracle put the actual comma, did you? No, you had to hear, where is the emphasis? And if you did miss the emphasis, you could get the message completely wrong. Work for the oracle, very good business. They were always right, because they could tell you after the fact, we put the comma there, the emphasis. You didn't hear it. The gods must have not been with you. Yes. But yeah, that's so it is basically lumped in with Charalambos, which is a saint's name, because it's Charalambos short is Harry as well, or in Greek is Charis. With like Christ is X, Charis is the same thing. It's a sort of an X, goes ha ha. It has that sound, and so it's the 10th of my name day is the 10th of February every year. So 10th of February is when I celebrate my name day. It's the saints' day. So the church has lumped Charilos and a lot of other ancient Greek names in with specific where they've got common or similar origins, or some elements that are similar. So that's how I got lumped with Charalambos. And it's, in short, we're both called Charis, and always people ask you, what are you, a Charilos or Charalambos? Your friends usually do that.
Pretty interesting.
Do Greek Orthodox practice prostrating, bowing in prayer? Did Muslims absorb that from the Eastern Christians, Harry? They do have a bit of that. Whether look, in general in the Middle East, that sort of thing existed a bit in that regard. Whether the Eastern Orthodox, I know that Eastern Orthodox influence, because when the Turks took over most of the Middle East and the Greek world, and they absorbed the what is called the Eastern Roman Empire. A lot of the actual ruling classes of the Greek world were converted to Islam and actually became part of the elites of the Ottoman Empire. And so the religious, the Greek Orthodox type religious courts that existed, they pretty much are what the Sharia courts are today. So they did absorb part of the Eastern Orthodox type religious courts, but they modified them. So, and also the principles of basically having, the interpretational, people that are theologians, in their case, they are basically similar practitioners that actually interpret the literature or the script or stuff like that. So yes, there is a bit of that sort of stuff. There was an influence. And so obviously to early Islam, there is a lot of elements that have come from Orthodoxy that have been sort of incorporated. I mean, Muslims will not recognize that today, that's true, but they do exist in their practices. They've absorbed a number of elements of that. You have to know the history to know which elements they are, to be able to point them out in that regard. Because remember, the Turks were pretty much a tribal Central Asian society that came into that area and became incorporated within the sort of Muslim world as sort of warriors or mercenaries for the Arabs and stuff like that. And then basically got privileged positions within that sort of those caliphates, and then eventually were able to overthrow the caliphates and take control of the whole region. That's what actually happened. The Greek world was absorbed as well, but that's what, because of the Fourth Crusade that attacked the city, brought down the Eastern Roman Empire, and then it was basically segmented and broken up into little elements. So all that was left of what was the Eastern Roman Empire was basically the city and a bit of territory in the Peloponnese, and that was easy for the Turks to take over. So it wasn't the early times when they attacked, they failed. It was just basically when they found the whole Eastern Roman Empire on its knees and absorbed it, and absorbed a lot of its practices. A lot of the Ottoman administrative structures are basically Byzantium, Eastern Roman Empire administrative structures. They were just basically absorbed in total in that regard. So, yeah. And then the divided states of the Crusaders basically were picked off one after another very easily after that. But generally speaking, a lot of those practices and administrative structures and stuff like that were absorbed by the Ottomans. And obviously then those practices, because they controlled both the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa and all that, obviously after 400 odd years, they imposed those. So you could say that most of these regions basically have some elements of the, both in the religion and also in the administrative side of things, a lot of the Byzantium side elements there. Yes. So yeah, bit of a history lesson. So yes, most people think, Greece as the cradle of Western civilization, as it's called. The Greeks never really looked west; they looked east. Most of their interactions with the Persians and other populations to the east, not to the west. Most of the influences coming into Greece were from the east, not from the west. Most people know it was the Greeks that actually influenced the west via the Romans. First, the Etruscans and the Romans were influenced by the Greek colonists. So it was the actual, not Greeks from the mainland Greece, actual Greece, the heartland. It was the colonial Greeks living in, places like Syracuse, in the southern part of Italy. We're talking about, southern Italy, and also Sicily, or the coast of parts of the coast on on the eastern side of Italy, which is the Adriatic, part of that, there were Greek colonies there. Above that were the Etruscans, but the Etruscans actually both adopted a lot of Greek customs, architecture, and a lot of things of Greek, and had a lot of interactions with the Greeks. And then you've got along the actual area where, south of France, all that coastline there was full of Greek colonies. And so all these populations were influenced directly from the colonists, and even their language. Latin is based on that dialect that comes from Chalkis, because the first colonists came from Chalkis, that island to the northeast of Athens, to that part of the world. And so they influenced the language, the culture, and all that. So it was a Greek dialect of language and culture and all that. It wasn't because Greece has varied customs and all that, even today, because of regionality and stuff like that from that time. And so when you look at Europe, it was more the colonist Greeks of Sicily and southern France and southern Italy, I should say, not Sicily only, and southern France, that were the ones that influenced both the Romans, the Etruscans, and the rest of Europe, rather than the mainland, where their orientation was more towards the east. And it's the reason why in Greece to this day we've still got some elements of Eastern, elements in our culture and in our customs and stuff like that, because of that reason, that our traditional orientation was in that direction. And it's probably the other reason why Greeks have the only, they've got, in terms of Hopla groups, they are very, even though they've got a strong Indo-European influence, they still have a very distinct Hopla group in terms of their origins. That means that there are still the real ancient genes of the Aegean and all that are still prevalent within the Greek people to this day. So, so they are considered by a lot of biologists in terms of being one of the ancient, the earliest peoples of Europe, especially Southern Europe, and basically having a very distinct Hopla group in that regard. So, yeah. Anyway, and to this day, to a large extent, because remember, even the Ottomans, they absorbed a lot of populations, like especially Greeks. The Greeks of Minor Asia pretty much were absorbed. So where the Greeks of Greece, there were very little absorption, but the major, the ones in Asia Minor, a lot of them were converted and a lot of them were absorbed, which means that today probably, up to possibly even 50% of the gene pool within the so-called Turks are really Greek, or even more in some cases, in some regions. So yeah, it's probably the reason why Turks have got such hostility compared to other Turks in other parts of the world. They've got greater hostility. It's sometimes when you're not really, no longer, underlying that you're not really 100% Turk, and you probably got the enemy inside you genetically, and it's usually mixed people. So a bit like in Africa, where you've got like the coloureds, as they call it in South Africa, where they really have a difficult situation with the actual other Africans, because they're really in that halfway house of two distinct groups that were at war with each other. And it's the same sort of thing. And I think that's that underlying pathology of trying to, and it's the reason why the young Turks, when they took over, Kemal Ataturk and people like that, were trying to create a distinct, where before it wasn't. The Ottoman Empire was more sort of a religious empire than, that respected others, but it was more a multi-ethnic type thing, where they tried to create a specific identity. And that's where, it really became problematic, and you became sort of this bizarre sort of chauvinism, to this day, where they still sort of have this uncomfortable relationship with the people in the region. Yes. It's, yeah, well, some other day I'll go into it a bit more. Let's move on.
Well, the history nerd in me finds this very interesting.
Yes, I mean, I usually, now and then, because I get into conversations with people about like the Treaty of Lausanne and some of the other treaties and stuff like that. And I go, well, have you actually read the treaty? A lot of people haven't, and they keep on making mistakes and errors like that. For instance, the Treaty of Lausanne does not cover the the Treaty of Lausanne is quite clear. It says that it's 3 kilometers off the Turkish coast, and it only incorporates Imvro and Denado, which are, and the Bosphorus and stuff like that. Does not incorporate any other islets, rocks, or islands, which means that they are ceded to Greece, and it was quite clear in the treaty. And the bottom part was controlled by Italy, and then that was handed after the Second World War back through the Treaty of Paris. And on that part, the Greeks have because it's like, you buying a piece of land next to somebody, the boundary still doesn't change just because you bought something. And that land basically is still covered under the Treaty of Paris and the previous treaty. And that actually allows you to have military arms on those islands of the Dodecanese, because there's no restrictions on the Italians. Now, the other islands, basically, along the Aegean, you can't. But the Greeks have forces, but they are National Guard forces, like gendarmerie. And the treaty is written in French, and it actually allows police, gendarmerie, like paramilitaries. And that's what they are. The difference is they've just got military personnel seconded to the paramilitary force. And so they wear all their uniforms as the paramilitary. So they are like the National Guard in America. They call it Ethniki National Guard. And basically, they are there and allowed under the treaty. So they're not violating any treaty, because it does stipulate police and National Guard, or gendarmerie as they call it in French, are permitted. And all the units are National Guard units, which are for domestic internal security. They're just basically armed to the teeth. We've got a lot of they've got a lot of domestic security issues here. They need to be armed to the teeth with tanks to keep those civilians under control. So, yes, there's always grey areas in that. But at the same time, they never had that sort of level of, firepower in the past. The only reason why they had to is because in the past, like Turkey, if you take a look at all their bases, they're all oriented towards the Soviet Union. Upwards, the old Soviet Union, or the Warsaw Pact. Greece is, again, its military facilities are further north, the majority of them, again, because of NATO requirements in the past with the Warsaw Pact. Now they're there, but that's where they were for those reasons. So it's a historical legacy. But what happened is, when the wall came down and things changed and there was more friction with Turkey, they actually moved forces, a massive force, what they call the Aegean Force, into Smyrna area, which is like a bit of an invasion force, you could call it. That's what the Greeks call it, like there was one with Cyprus. And so the Greeks justify that and say, well, we've beefed up our National Guard because you've basically brought a force, which under that treaty, you should not have forces in that area as well. And they have regular army forces. They're not National Guard forces, but regular army forces, which basically is a clear violation of the treaty. Not only the spirit, which the Greeks are, but a clear. And they moved forces there, and so the Greeks beefed up their National Guard. That's what happened. But in the south are allowed because they were Italians, and Greeks acquired them after the Second World War. Simple as that. So it's a funny situation. Was pointed out very well by the actual foreign minister. But it annoyed some people, but it had to be said. Now people are more aware of the situation, where before they weren't. It was always nice and dandy while the propaganda campaign happened in the background. It was there right in your face. And when they actually talked about Eastern Thraci, the Muslim minority there, well, said that's covered under the Treaty of Lausanne. They're not Turks. They're Greek Muslims. as the treaty stipulates. And the people in the other part were stipulated quite clearly as Greeks, not as Christians, but Greeks in Denador, Emvro, which were actually forced out illegally again. And also there was also the community that was actually quite a few people forced out in from around Constantinople or around the capital of what was before, or Istanbul as it's called, which is both are Greek names actually. So I don't really care which one people use. It's up to them. It's not a big issue for me. I don't see the value in conflict for either people. I know a lot of young people are less interested. It seems to all these old people that are more interested. And the problem is there is international law that quite clearly stipulates where the boundary lies. Both those treaties quite clearly stipulate what the ownership of islands, islets and all that. And under international law, all islands have a continental shelf, and all islands actually have territorial waters. Because otherwise New Zealand, an island state, would not have territorial waters. It's absurd. All islands have. It's quite clear in the international law of the sea. Anybody can go and Google it, and even Wikipedia's got it, and actually explains that all these islands, rocks, and everything has territorial waters. So, unfortunately for Turkey today, that's to their disadvantage in how much they can access water in the Aegean or the Mediterranean, or access resources in that. Bad luck. That's how the world goes. There are landlocked countries. What are they going to say? Oh, well, a bit of my next door neighbour in order to access the sea. Well, bad luck. You were there at that location, and that's your boundary. Just because you don't like it nowadays, that's just ridiculous. But this is sort of the rewriting of history, rewriting of a lot of things, which especially this current government, which is really just crazy. Some of the stuff that they say is just wild, lunatic sort of stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if Erdogan started saying that aliens actually put him up to it. He's really, way out there. And he's doing a disservice to his own people. I mean, he's spending a whole lot of shitload of money propping up a number of corrupt regimes around the world that he thinks he's going to get favors from in the future. Unlikely. These people are just basically using them. And his own population is basically, struggling with the inflation and struggling to basically put enough food on their table, which is an absurdity in its sense. And even the Greeks, I mean, they've got their own problems there. They don't want to be spending all this money on arms and stuff like that. But if you're threatened, existential threat, what do? You got no option. If somebody wants your land and actually makes it quite clear that those islands belong to us and ignores the Treaty of Lausanne, which was a treaty to their advantage, because before that there was a treaty of service. And that treaty actually provided the Greeks with parts of Minor Asia. And so I say to Erdogan, you want to revert back to the previous treaty? Give back those lands. You can't have it both ways. It was actually Greece lost those territories. They actually lost land in Asia Minor and Eastern Thrace. They lost those territories. They had to give them up, and some islands like Dinador and Emvro. So they lost territory with the 1923 treaty. These were all parts of these treaties after the First World War, like the Versailles Treaty, a whole lot of other treaties that were signed concurrently after with a number of nations. And that's what these happened. There were others that followed even after that into the 30s. So there were a lot of different treaties for a lot of different groups in the region and other regions within Europe and beyond. And so that was part of that interwar years as well, with those sort of changes. And back then, as the foreign minister of Greece actually pointed out, the Turks had no problems with those agreements because they were to their advantage. So they were happy with those treaties. Along comes a modern world and they're not. Well, bad luck, you know. You can't change history, reverse it, and only partially, not fully. Can't have it both ways. But unfortunately, the current leaders are very imperialistic, very militaristic, and very anti-democratic. And, when you get nasties like this in power, they just want to create wars, expansionism, and all that. But I don't really think there's going to be a war. Honestly, I know a lot of people, fear, but I think it's just a lot of, bravado from Erdogan and people like that. Even the Israelis that have both trained with the Turkish Air Force, and remember the Turkish Air Force has been decimated. Most of their top pilots are in jail because they were against Erdogan. So, and even them, so they brought a whole lot of people from Pakistan now who are useless pilots anyway, in comparison. And the Greeks are some of the best pilots in the world. I mean, they've actually won against the Americans at red flag on a number of occasions with not the best squadrons. So, the Israelis have actually, one Israeli officer actually said openly, 48 hours now, and that was before when Erdogan still had good pilots. Now it would probably be 24 hours and have air superiority and wipe out the Turkish Air Force. That's how good they are. I used to live on the west coast where they trained, where the school of tactical weapons, Oplon Taktikis as it's called, used to train. And those fucking guys, they used to fly like a nap of the earth, and they'd shoot up and do all these sort of maneuvers, ACMs. It was just fucking, you'd go, wow. They were just ridiculous in some of their stuff because that's all they trained. They're far better trained in that than attack missions because their focus has been on interceptions and ACM, So, and I would go on what basically the Israelis would say, because they've trained with both sides and they know. So it would not be in the best interests of the Turkish people, because once you've basically got that, the Greek aircraft are the only aircraft in the region that also have got a lot of anti-ship missiles, so they could actually do saturated attacks by both ship and air, and also land bases where they've got anti-ship missiles, which basically means a lot of ships would be lost by the Turkish, which would allow the Greeks to blockade navally and have air superiority. Their ground forces wouldn't last very long after that. So we've saw how Iraq fell apart very fast. At the end of the day, very highly skilled and trained people can make a big difference, So I would say it is crazy on their part to have these sort of wacky ideas of expansionism, and it would be to their disservice. I hope that the Turks rise up and get rid of Erdogan, get rid of him. He's basically a nuisance for anybody. He's made a mess of the whole region. He's invaded all sorts of regional countries and creating so much internal strife and instability. I mean, in the past, I had a fairly okay relationship with the Kurds. Then they started basically, really suppressing them a bit. And then they started attacking them on their borders. You can't be a multi-ethnic state and have, like 40% of your population being Kurds and then turning on them. That's going to end up in a disaster for, you can't turn on, even a third of the population if they're Kurds. I think they're high because they have a high, they've been breeding at a higher rate. But even if they were a third, that's still a large proportion of the population to turn on or deny them democratic rights in parliament. And turn them, if you deny somebody democratic rights, what option do you leave them other than the military option once they don't have a civilian electoral system? He's just trying to keep himself in power by eliminating his opponents, but he doesn't realize that he's creating instability within his own country long term. It's the same bullshit that Saddam Hussein did, trying to knock off his opponents, and eventually everybody rose up. At the end of it, it always turns a mess and in tears. And unfortunately, I think that Turkey's heading for a disaster with this leader. They are truly heading for a disaster. So, and that's why he's imprisoning everybody. He's taking out all his opponents. You know, he's completely and utterly out of control, this guy. Yeah. So, you know, I know some of my family worry because they're in Greece. You know, they worry about, you know, the ramifications that he could start some war in order to, you know, for misdirection or get people's minds off the crisis that's hitting the country. But I would say, no, I'd say it's a waste of time. I think if he's going to do anything, he'll try and start some sort of war to the east rather than Greece, you know, because at the end of the day, he's got the Kurdish issue, which is massive. And that's not going to be resolved. Had they basically created, you know, like a sort of some sort of autonomous status or you know, some protections under the law and, you know, incorporated them better within the actual, you know, democratic state, they wouldn't have these problems today. So Erdogan's basically created the problems himself. He's got nobody else to blame but himself for exacerbating these issues with the Kurds, you know. So in the end, I see potentially a Kurdish state coming out of it. Unfortunately, it's going to be quite a bloody affair. That's the problem with that. And the biggest problem is I don't see basically the problem for Greece is not going to be war. It's probably going to be more refugees and more, you know, if Turkey breaks down in any way. So could be a very big mess in that regard. So I'm just hoping that and this is where European pressure needs to come on, like, you know, some more pressure from the Americans and from the Europeans to force, you know, the issue and force this person to comply and, you know, stop basically doing the stuff that he's doing, you know, against the Kurds. You know, there's a whole lot of democratically elected people who are basically not calling for rebellion, are not calling for, you know, insurrection or anything else. Do not imprison them. Do not basically push them out, because you're going to basically create a disaster for yourself. Yeah. Anyway, spoke too much. This is a nutritional channel. We better get back on our sort of stuff. I remember when I first hurt my spinal disc, I would check YouTube videos for exercise, and comments were full of Indians. I imagine, unfortunately, widespread vegetarianism there. Yep, exactly. That's why there are a lot of those spinal issues. Vegans and vegetarians do have more of these issues, and they are more prevalent in places like India. People have a lot of, you know, and you actually will see a lot of like stuntedness in these sort of places, and also people with a lot of like where you've got sort of distorted spines, you know, in people, you know, sort of their back, sort of all these sort of distorted sort of spinal problems or whatever in those places like India. And it doesn't surprise me because of the poor nutrient density in some of the populations, because of vegetarianism and to some extent poverty as well. It's a mixed bag, but vegetarian doesn't help when you're not eating species appropriate foods. You know, it's going to be worse. Does it matter if you take these supplements at the same meal time? Not really. Not really. I suspect that's a taurine and stuff like that. I usually sort of take them, you know, here and there and all that. Yes, that's how far back I am. Shit. I just realized I've been talking too much about politics. Oh, God. What's good for brain fog and memory issues? Carnivore diet, carnivore diet, carnivore diet. That's what's good. I mean, you know, your brain, cholesterol, phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, you know, phospholipids, you know, eat plenty of eggs. That will help with brain fog, you know. actually that will help really well because organ meats and eggs are really high in the elements that are required by the brain. So yes. Yep. Yeah. Underappreciated arachidonic acid. Yes, very important. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look, I used to get I noticed when I noticed a big damn difference between shifting after in my mid 40s, because I used to get, I used to forget things and became very forgetful of things. A decade later, healthier and less forgetful. So definitely the food has something to do with it. There's nothing else. It's not like I've taken some miracle cure or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be the food. It can't be anything else. And the thing is, the awful thing is, we still don't know so much about meat. There are so many peptides and so many things in meat, but we still haven't done a lot of research, which is really unfortunate that we don't know enough. I think a number of people have spoken about it in the carnivore community, but the biggest problem is, how do you do this sort of stuff? It's, wonderful. Glyphosate. Yes, get more of it. Yes, so healthy for your gut. Oh, wonderful stuff. Not. Yes. What's the situation with glyphosate in Brazil, Loki?
It is actually pretty common. There's not that many restrictions to it, and even gardeners use it like regularly and stuff. And yeah,
I think you'll keep that for another time. The story, you want to tell your story and all that.
Another time, especially if I get positive results in a later time, I can tell you the whole story.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's a time and a place. It's up to you. I mean, as I said, I don't tell people what to do with themselves. Remember, when it comes to HbA1c, the glycating effect of red blood cells, you have to remember, when you're on a carnivore diet, you don't recycle as often. So you may get a pulse, you may get a false type result. You'd have to be very, very, very clean. And even then, so you'd have to basically just do steak only, no dairy, no nothing, for quite some period of time before you actually did the test, to just make sure that there is none of that sugar. Now, that's not an issue. It just basically means that those red blood cells aren't basically, if you take a look at sickle cell anemia and all these sort of diseases, blood-borne disease and all that, what is it? The breakdown of red blood cells much faster. So a species-appropriate diet actually slows that down, because they don't have to be recycled. They don't, but obviously you will get, compared to, the best thing to do is actually to look at your blood. If your blood sugars are running every day continuously at a very low normal, like the Messiah were that Mary was testing, that's an indication that your real HbA1c is going to be low. There's actually a website where you can actually put these figures in, your blood sugar and stuff like that, and then through the average, generate HbA1c through a calculator, and it's just as good as basically testing. Insulin, if you're running continuously at a, you've got good levels of, you've got a low grade ketones and low normal, you can be guaranteed that the insulin to glucagon ratio is going to be low, which means your insulin is going to be low. If your blood sugar is low, but you've got no ketones whatsoever, no ketones, you're zero, the ketones come up zero, and you're feeling, you've got certain like hypoglycemic effects or stuff like that, then there's a possibility that you've basically maybe running higher insulin for a number of reasons, which I'm not going to speculate on, because it could be a number of reasons, pathogens, all sorts of things. So it's not a good idea to speculate. But obviously that when you suppress with higher insulin glucagon, you're going to drop your ketone production. Okay, so that's what happens. When glucagon goes up higher than insulin, that's what actually happens. It happens with fasting, as I've pointed out in other recent videos as well. But I've said it before, but explained it a bit more carefully this time around. But so cholesterol is a waste of time. Your body will basically, if you're going to do anything on cholesterol, I would looking at doing a proper panel at the size, whether they are, the A or B type. What type is it? Is it what they call the larger fluffy type, the A, or is it, the B, the more atherogenic type? That's what I would do. I'd do something like that. So liver panel, yeah, you could do that. It would indicate that you're probably not getting enough taurine or choline if you've got liver enzymes up, or there may be some other underlying condition and all that hasn't been addressed properly. There could be prior fibrotic tissue that hasn't been resolved, which basically means then I have to up my level of taurine to clear out that fibrotic tissue. Like I got rid of my fibrotic tissue out of my heart. Okay, and I've reduced my fibrotic tissue out of my left lung. That's basically, so it depends on, certain things, yes, are good to be actionable. Certain things, probably a waste of money. So, yeah, look, if you've had look, all of us have had a lot of damage. So, and diagnosed celiacs, yep. 4 or 5, went low carb, then carny. So you're very recent. So you've got quite a lot of underlying things. So are you on a low dose vitamin E? The Jarrow one that I've talked about, you should be, if you're not. Are you taking a choline supplement or eating at least minimum 3 eggs a day, if not 4, to get sufficient choline to export fat out of the liver? Are you on an MK4 supplement? You probably need to be, again, to sort out a number of issues in the liver as well, and the FXR enzymatic pathway. Maybe even milk thistle for a couple of months would be a good idea as well. Taurine definitely would be a good idea, because that will basically sort out the gallbladder liver issues and also remove a lot of the fibrotic tissue in the liver. So, which is important. So to get proper liver function, if you don't get proper liver function, you can't lose weight. You can't do a lot of things. A lot of things don't work properly. Metabolism, your digestive system just doesn't work properly. So yeah, there's all those sort of things. You sneaked something in there.
Oh god, that one took a long time to make. Oh god.
I better put it up. Let me just, I need to zoom it. Hold on.
I should have put my watermark in it. It took really long to make.
You should have. You should have. Do you want to put it? Do you want to put it up your watermark and then we'll put it up, or what's your? Or don't worry. Look. Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll just put it up. And there, think Aurelia. Oh, you can read. You read it out. It's your work.
No, just read it. I like when you read it. It's funny.
Think, Aurelius. Think. What will your pancreas be like in 500 days, you cockwomble? Good point. Bored man bad. But I want to eat sweet stuff. I don't believe you. You're a bold keto guru. Poor Aurelius. Poor Aurelius. Oh, he's had to put up with, it could have been worse. Ted could have been there. Foul-mouthed Ted. Yes.
And just to make it clear, this is, I obviously cannot draw this good, especially on a PC. But yeah, I just used the template that someone made and just add the details and stuff.
Nice results. Kate said it. Nice work, Luke. Yes, Lukey. Very good. Well done.
Thanks.
I think Bart will appreciate that one.
I sent it to him.
Oh, good. Whatever he is, he's probably out training. If he was here, I'd call him on. Never know. He may appear in the evening. You never know. Ashamedly, I was vegan, vegetarian for 25 misguided years. Yes, that can cause a lot of problems and a lot of gallbladder issues as well and digestive issues. Yes, that poor liver and gallbladder. So, yes, you will definitely need taurine to sort that one out in that regard. And if you're having any digestive problems, you may need to look at some bile salts and stuff like that to basically help it along. That can be a problem with a bit of loose stools as well. So don't go crazy on the bile salts. Use it in small amounts just to help with digestion. I know other people recommend higher amounts. I don't. And then using the taurine to sort of try and emulsify and sort of loosen up and get bile to flow properly again, which is the key thing. So, yeah, go to 3 grams initially of taurine. Don't go to 5. Do that for a couple of weeks and then slowly move to 4 and then 5, because we don't want things to be really unsettled very fast as well. So we want, and then at that level, if you do it for at least a bit over about a year or whatever, it depends. It depends on how bad that part is as well. You will notice a bit of discomfort under your rib cage, and as stuff flows from the actual gallbladder, it'll transmit across to the pancreas, because the ducts do go through the pancreas, and so you will sometimes feel a bit of discomfort. You probably may already be feeling some discomfort, but it's just, that's why I say don't go really hard on the taurine, because we just want small amounts to sort of get released and pushed through. And we don't want anything getting caught in there, because we don't want you ending up in hospital either. That's another reason why I don't really recommend the sort of gallbladder flushes, because they can be problematic in some cases. Sometimes they can, smaller stones, can sort of get through. Larger stones can be a problem. You may end up in hospital. Yes, with something that has happened to my father. He had one that lodged and then ripped through his pancreas and caused him shitloads of inflammation and pancreatitis. And he ended up in hospital for a couple of weeks. So he wasn't. Now he's fine, and now he's using taurine on a daily basis for a number of other reasons, but it helps in that area, and his digestion is great. So, yes, very much so. John, why are you asking these questions? I hope this is in regards to your partner.
I think John is actually a girl, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, sorry if you are. Oh, God. Yeah, sorry. Slipped up on that one. Yes, I do apologise if that's the case. Yes, damn. I'm an ethnic. All these damn ethnic names. Yes. I would say that if you keep the diet clean and you get enough fat, women need a bit more fat than men, things will normalize. From what I've heard, a quick technique for normalizing some of these things, if they are hormonal based, is also boron. So taking boron for, it's like for menopausal, but also it seems to help with sort of settling down some of the hormonal sort of fluctuations, especially if you've come from a different diet and you're moving to a carnivore diet. 12 for a week, 9 for a week, 6 for a week. Then for about a month after that at 3 milligrams. 3 milligrams is like basically eating 2 avocados. So it's pretty safe from there on. And it does help to sort of normalize a number of these hormones. And that could also help improve, unless there's some other, in terms of just general sort of menstrual health, long term, it will be the carnivore diet that will help. And if there's any sort of fibrotic tissue in your in that area, also taurine will help. So taurine is a good supplement to deal with any fibrotic tissue like that comes from PCOS, things like that. So because there again, you've got a fibrotic tissue. So I would say that taurine would be the go-to supplement to help with that along as well. That's why carnivore diet in general, because it's got taurine, does tend to heal. But if people are transitioning to a carnivore diet or the early stages, they're still going to have some of these issues. And so using higher amounts can actually sort of, it's like taking a higher dose to deal with a problem, to correct something that's been there from the past lifestyle. Hope that is of help. Please report back and tell us how you feel. And please let me know, are you a woman, or is it, are you asking these questions on behalf of your partner? Yes, Kate. Yes, he is. Or she is. I don't know. Oh, God, I'm going to get into trouble.
I'm pretty sure, though, but I'm sleepy. That's why I'm not affirming it properly.
Exactly. And that's a good CAC score to have. Very much so. 0 is what we're looking for. Yes, most of the other stuff is pretty much irrelevant, as Ivor Cummings would say. That's the part which I've already pinned. Got to try and move through these things. Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Look, all these conditions are related to the same, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all these conditions that people have, PCOS, you name it, pick it, is all derangements of because of different genetics and stuff like that. the arrangements of the same cause, seed oils, refined sugars, and crap, that's really what are driving a lot of these sort of things. And we need to move as far away from those. And it takes time to heal. So just keep that in mind. Yes. Women tend to be more susceptible. It's because of their caring nature or stuff like that. Well, that's what I put it down to anyway. That they think about these things, where men are just basically at that young age are probably thinking about how to play with toys. Then they move to the next stage, which is how to play with women and cars and fast cars. And then after that, when they do get to a certain age of maturity, which usually is in 30s and plus for most males, then they start thinking about other things. So usually they are less susceptible to these sort of things, influences. Good. Yeah, look, a lot of people notice the same things, allergies go away, arthritis, all sorts of things, brain fog resolves, all these sort of things. My younger sister, and she only occasionally, she does, every year she does the 1 month carnivore thing, and the rest of the year she's just basically keto, low carb type, so she still has some vegetables and stuff like that, like pumpkin and zucchini and stuff like that. And pretty much she noticed the same thing, the sort of those, her asthma went away, and some of the other sort of issues went away as well. So, yeah, it changed. But she still has probably more indiscretions than I do.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Look, it's a strange food environment. She actually works for a company down here, hardware Bunnings. She's one of their supervisors. So, people in that sort of environment are eating a lot of probably inappropriate things. Yes. So it's the way it is. I'm just going to click right through these until I actually get an answer directed at me directly. Whenever you think autoimmunity, always think meat and sun. The meat and sun combination. Whenever you think about autoimmunity, keep it simple. We don't need to complicate. You eat a carnivore diet and you get enough vitamin D. Most, if not all, eventually, depends on the timing, can take a bit longer for some people, usually resolve. The older you are, the more damaged you are, it's going to take longer to resolve. The younger you are, like Lukey, it takes less time. It's the way it goes.
Glad I found out about carnivore quite early in my life.
Exactly. Oh, look, I sometimes say to myself, where would I be? Well, I wouldn't be on YouTube, for one thing. So for you guys, it would be a disadvantage. But for me, it would have been I'd be much younger and much, stronger and many other things. So, yes, on a selfish level, yes, it would have been much better for me if I'd found carnivore much earlier. Yes, exactly. The genetic sequences of Anatolian populations show them to be the same population from antiquity, not from Central Asia. Maybe only the ruling class was. So it is Greek on Greek fight, possibly. Yes, I would not be surprised. Because remember, in those days, you have to remember, even the Russians, the Rus, as they're called, the Rus were basically, their ruling classes were basically from Scandinavia. That's where they get their name from, Rus. But the population in general was Slavic. It's a bit like in the Normans when they took over, the British, the majority of the population was Saxon, but the ruling or Anglo-Saxon, but the ruling class was Norman, and some of the elements of the Norman class is still there to this day within the ruling classes. So yes, that is very much it, and we know that from historical things where children were taken from Greek families and all that, and were forced into forced conversions in thousands or millions. So yeah, they just don't read. I usually say to I challenge my Turkish friends, do a 23andMe. Maybe then you'll actually make different choices on how you view the people to the west of you. You'll probably see them as as brothers rather than enemies. So yes, very much. Yeah. That's probably another underlying reason why I don't have that hostility. It's more their political class, their rulers that have basically got these nasty sort of views, and that annoy me. But it's not the population. I think if the population really checked themselves out, and I know some people have done that and actually realised, that they, I've known some that have found that they were, 80 and 90% Greek or more. And they were shocked. It's a bit like Bobby, when he actually did his own test, remember? And he was shocked to find out that most of his genetics were Bulgarian. He had some Greek genetics in there as well. He was shocked as well. So it changed him in that regard. So, but the problem is the majority of people over there are not wealthy enough to basically afford 23andMe, and wouldn't see the benefit of it because they've been ideologically brainwashed to think in a certain way. Well, we all sort of are. We're brainwashed by our families. We're brainwashed by our faiths. We're brainwashed by our societies historically. And my parents, their great-grandparents were all sort of conditioned within your tribe, your nation, or whatever. And so as we move forward, we just tell the same stories and we just believe them and accept them. And that's our identity. So in a sense, we all are. They've had a number of decades that are the same thing. The only way you can actually is when you look under the hood. You look behind the scene and see a different world. And it's people like myself, like Lukey, that are mavericks that do that actually look beyond and realize that the picture is, at the end of the day, we're all Africans. We all came out of Africa. We're all, the genetic differences between humans are minuscule, like 99.99 is, we're talking about, there is a small amount that is the difference, which is minuscule.
Yes.
Actually, the Sand people of the Kalahari, they are the group that is actually separate quite a bit. They have far more genetic differences than the rest of us. They have more closeness to the original Homo sapiens, which were more tanned skin. So the sort of darker or lighter complexion that most other Homo sapiens have are basically of the other Hopla groups and the groups that moved out of Africa. But even that is we're talking about a very tiny percent. And at the end of the day, if you were to take Germans or Italians or French or Scandinavians and stick them in Africa for 20,000 years or whatever, or 10,000 years or whatever, you know what? They'd go dark as well.
Indeed.
They'd adapt to that environment, So it's melanin that changes an adaptation and becomes over multiple generations pronounced. adaptations to certain foods also is an adjustment over time. So yeah, as I say, get over it. If you've got a problem at that level,
Yes.
genes do
Yeah.
not lie, and that's one benefit that came out of the actual, that global DNA on the what was it called? What I'm talking about. It's got a specific name to it, which was where they did genetic tests for all the population of the Earth and looking at the Human Genome Project.
Yes, that's it.
The Human Genome Project
Genome
just
Project.
showed how similar we are, basically, and the rest is history. But obviously, we have created colourful, different histories, different cultures, different all that. They are as valuable as anything else. I don't devalue them. I see a lot of value in the complexity and creative beauty that humans are able to create. It's when people basically, become nasty towards each other, very tribal, that I've got a problem with that sort of stuff. Grow up.
Yeah.
You're just being used as cannon fodder by the elites to kill others, so you can take the land and then hand it over to your elites from their elites. That's all it is. Anyway, undiagnosed celiacs destroyed my villi in my small intestine. Yes, they can do that. You weren't getting enough lactoferrin, my dear. Had you been on a raw milk diet, you would have had a bit of protection on that front. Lactoferrin binds lectins and removes them. And let's not forget, gluten is a lactin. This is why people who were pre-pasteurization, we did not have look, the quantities of gluten and the quantities of lectins were much lower, and people used to ferment stuff and lower the level, and then you added the dairy in, which actually bound the remainder and got rid of it. Now we've pasteurized and got rid of all the lactoferrin, and on top of that, we're basically our plants are basically hybridized and actually super lectin enhanced, and we don't even ferment them or treat them the way historically we did to reduce them. So we're giving ourselves much higher doses when we eat kibble. So, and we used to consume less kibble back then, more animal foods, and that's why we're basically getting so bad. I was dangerously low in the micros. Doctor checked and I had osteoporosis. Doesn't surprise me. A lot of people do. Osteopenia, osteoporosis, all these things are endemic.
My mom.
My dear, protein. Embrace the protein god. Eat more protein. Do not, I usually say to women, 2 to 2.5 grams. In your case, I would definitely go at the upper limit of 2.5 grams per kilo of body weight, of normal body weight. Okay? So if you're a bit overweight, work out your normal body weight for your BMI type thing, and based on your muscular type configuration. If you can, sometimes that doesn't really work really well. If you've got a lot of muscular sort of stuff, yeah, there's a bit of that. So, but I don't look at my own weight. I look at what would be the normal lean BMI for somebody of my height. So I use the height as a vehicle to the normal, and then basically say, well, what are the protein requirements? And if you are more muscular, you would add another 20% for women and probably 50% for men in that regard. So that's how you would cover that other part, how much you need. If you don't have as much muscles, you just go on the sort of BMI and then work out the actual protein requirements for that specific size. So it's like, they do it in veterinary. This is the funny thing. If you go into veterinary, they actually treat the animals. They say this animal is this, this amount of this size. So they would say it's that size or whatever. And so if one animal is a bigger animal, it's double the size of the other, they will give it double the amount of micronutrients to the requirement of the size of the animal. There are no RDIs. They are weight size dependent.
Funny, no?
So what the size, yeah. And that's why their veterinary science is basically has the better approach. So if you want to support the micronutrient side or the macro side, you have to do it to the size of the animal that you're dealing with. And that's why I say to people, you need to feed your body according to the requirements of the tissue size that you have that you need to support. So somebody who was like Sean Baker, who's a massively built like a brick shit house and very tall, will have much higher protein requirements to somebody like me who's much shorter and less muscular. It's just the way it is, So if I become more muscular, I'll have to a bit more, but I'll never get to Sean Baker's level, is because I'm not as tall and not as large. And so my requirements are going to be different. So that's why I don't like the RDIs. That's why I don't like that. And I usually say to people, what is your tissue size? I do want to do a video on this to go and explain all this sort of stuff properly and how to basically, because I want people to have I don't give meal plans to people. I think they're ridiculous. Nobody will adhere to a meal plan for all their life. That's not going to happen. So what you need to do is learn how much protein to eat every day to maintain your body in a certain way, and how much fat you need to eat any day to support your endocrine system and energy requirements for the rest of your life. That is basically what this type of video that I want to do. And basically, once you've worked out where your target size is, that's how I've already nearly told you. That's how, for those who are a bit more adventurous that want to do the calculations themselves, that's how you work out your protein and your fat requirements for the rest of your life. And your body will shrink or grow to that size. So if you're too thin, frail, blah, blah, you'll grow bigger, stronger, muscular body to that size that is required for good health. And if you're too big, you'll shrink. That's what you're supposed to do. Adjust the body with the proper nutrition that body requires, and it will normalize to where it should be. That's what you need, that sort of information, which is actionable and easy. And then you just follow your life appropriately, and it's less complicated and it's less difficult, harsh and stuff like that. So,
Well, Harry, I think I'll get going because it's nearly 1 a.m. for me.
Yeah, I'm about to pull the pin on this, myself.
Yeah, but well, see y'all later and stay well. Nice to be here once again.
I'm just going to quickly.
All right.
He's asking John about deadlift, so it must be male. God, you guys are confusing me. So what do you do yourself? Because you've seen some improvements yourself.
Yeah.
You do any deadlifting?
Actually, no. But I do think deadlifts are like a really valuable exercise. But for convenience sake, because once I started doing calisthenics, I really abandoned the gym. I don't do them as much. I think they are good. I think you should do them. And I have a few alternatives I do, but none of them are as good as a deadlift. So yeah, it is a very effective exercise.
Yeah. I've got a different opinion, but I want to do a video on that. So I'm not going to tell you now at this point.
All right.
I'm going to do a video and cover a number of different things in regards to what I think is appropriate for all muscle groups and not for bodybuilding necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things for bodybuilding, but more in terms of, what most people want is a healthy physique that is functional. So that is that will happen this year, probably in about 2 months' time, is sort of my aim for that, and to go into that sort of stuff. And I still haven't done my other videos on bodybuilders, like what kills them and stuff like that, and a few other things. I've been talking about it, but they are coming. It's just a matter of time. It's having the time to put them together. But I will be going into some detail about those sort of things and discussing those sort of things in that regard. I may even get Bart on and actually talk about a bit about some of the muscle physiology sort of sides, and have a bit of a detailed conversation on some of the muscle energetics, and go into that and sort of look at some of the exercises, and then look at what's actually happening in the physiological, and some of the claims that are being making. Do they actually really work in that physiology, or is it just a lot of BS? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to. It's something that I wanted to do with Bart. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to do, some ancestral stuff. We never got around doing them, but I'll have to have contact him and have a bit of a Skype session with him, and actually try to pressure him to do something like this, another collaboration like we've done in the past.
Please do, Harry.
I'm going to try and do something like that, because he keeps on, promising me sometimes, and he goes, "Oh, I'm too busy with this Cerule and all this sort of stuff." Like, oh, fuck, that's it. I'm setting up all these other websites. I noticed, tell me about it. So he's mushrooming websites left, right, and center recently. So yeah, anyway.
Yes.
You got to joke with him. He's good value. His heart's in the right place and all that, And I know he comes a bit commercial, with the Cerule stuff. It is a different animal. He didn't want to go down that pathway. He didn't want to basically work for somebody else like a boss, or basically go down that pathway. But, finances, you still have to eat. Yeah. That can actually affect stuff like that. But as I said to him, I said, look, you're not pushing kibble. You're not pushing some shit supplement. You're actually pushing. It's actually a product that actually reversed your, the loss of your near loss of your eyesight. So it's not a bad product. If you're basically going to be pushing any product, it's not a bad product to push compared to some other garbage that's actually out there. So, on the sort of the moral side, you know what I mean? So I think that sort of, because I told him, go for it, in that way. I was very supportive. And I've, even when he was in his competition, trying to help him as much as possible in that regard as well. But, as I said, people still got to eat and all that. As I said, with all stem cell stuff, the only thing, and Bart would agree with me on this, if somebody's got an active cancer, definitely not. But that goes for niacin as well. If you've got an active cancer, I would not be doing niacin. I would not be doing basically, any stem cell whatever. I would be doing a lot of senolytics, and, that's what I would be doing. And I still need to do that video on my senolytics. It's coming. Don't worry. Anyway, I better let you go and wind this up shortly. Anyway.
All right. Thanks
for being here.
Thanks. It's always nice to be here. Always good to be on the show. I really like contributing however I can. Yeah, look,
thanks for all the contributions you've made. In the last couple of, what is it? Well over a year now. Yeah. So I've appreciated it. I've appreciated it a lot. You've brought some color and some, some other stuff. You've even surprised me with some knowledge of other things that I wasn't aware of. So yeah, I do thank you for all your contributions, both the colorful ones and the informative ones. And go and get some sleep. Anyway,
for sure.
Thanks for being here. See
ya. See ya.
Well, it's back to me. Oh, well, you'll have to put up with me. It's the way it goes. Don't get me started. Oops. Oh, yes, another lie. Ah, yes. And people do believe it. And what do? They stuff up their digestive system by reducing the stomach acidity and the gut acidity. And they end up with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and candida. Wonderful. Yes, yes. The crackpots out there. Anyway, vegan gains and that vegan teacher are from, Canada. That's right. Yeah, they are. Oh, look there. In honor of Harry, I was a pork and chicken. You've had a pork and chicken day, and the added benefit was legs with back, some with the kidneys. Yes, yes. Well, chickens, good source of MK4, and pork, especially if it's got all that fat and gelatinous material, very good, really good. Absolutely. Great stuff. Harry, looks like I'm doing good. I'll drop you the idea of the blood test. Yep, just leave a link. Good. That's good. Get some taurine into you, but go slow. I always say go slow because it has an osmotic effect on the intra and extracellular fluids. That means the fluids in your cells and outside your cells in the bloodstream. So it does actually regulate, does bring blood pressure down initially, and then it sort of normalizes, but it does have an reduction in blood pressure. Plus, it actually regulates better. This is why species appropriate diet ends up, rather than a keto, low carb type, with a lot of vegetables, tends to basically regulate even electrolytes much better over time. But sometimes people are deranged so much they need to use taurine and some electrolytes to sort things out initially, and then more salt, and that usually fixes up. Once you've actually put the potassium, magnesium in, always careful with the potassium. Don't go to keep it always in the safe zone. And you've supplemented for a while and got to a certain level, keep up the salted meat, and pretty much the rest takes care of itself. You still have a lower grade sort of ketosis, which basically will keep you in the more sweetest, and it will regulate better the fluids as well. Ultimately, the carnivore diet is much better, and you take a look at the tribal population that have been multiple generations on a more carnivorous diet, and they don't have to do any of this sort of stuff. It's because we've got some derangements that it takes time to adjust. Yes, he's always good with those ones. Yes, those people with a repeat fan club. Yes. Yes, exactly. I'm going to shortly pull the pin. So I'm just muffling through really fast. Oops, lost my spot. Did I tell you, Harry, that since going carnivore, that my factor 8 levels went from 30 to 33 to 48. I was floored. I clot much quicker and stronger after I cut myself now. Things do change. It depends also what animal foods you do consume. It can vary. If you take a look at like the Inuit, they tend to less because they also consume far more. They combine a lot. I know they use the fat that they use, which gives them metabolic water, and advantages there. It's primarily seal fat, but they still consume a certain amount of fish, which tends to increase their omega-3s, which tends to basically reduce their clotting. So they bleed much easier, which is a bit like the Japanese who eat excessive fish. They do suffer far more strokes, in a sense. So, yeah, in that regard. But I always say if you're eating a species-appropriate diet, things will normalize where they have to be over time. So, look, myself, I don't have any severe clotting issues or underclotting issues. Things are much more normal as well. Cut myself, things seem to sort themselves pretty quick. They seem to basically heal pretty much faster than they used to, even a couple of years back. So, I know it's anecdotes, but at the end of the day, our bodies function better. So, and that's an important thing. So we want the body to respond quickly and sort things out. So yes. What? I'd be super cool if birds could piss like other animals. Birds with peckers flopping around. Okay. You've got an interesting imagination. You're an animal. Oh, yes. Oh, very jolly. Cock's terrifying. Remember the bowerbird one? Oh, where have I got it? Oh, hold on. I'll have to show that just for a laugh. Where did I keep that? Oops. Hold on. Oops. Hold on. Was it doing that? You mean like this one? Yeah. Just add. What's it doing? You mean like this one? He took my advice. Don't know what happened to him. He's sort of vanished off the interwebs. Maybe we all think that it was Blinky's sort of sideshow, and he gave up on it, but we don't know. He's never owned up to it. Anyway, I think I'm gonna pull the pin. Yes, don't eat salads. Not good for you. Listen to children. They say they are yucky, yucky, yucky. Kids know something. Oh, I'm nearly at the bottom. Can you believe that? Exactly. Veterinarians really know their shit. More than some doctors. Thank you. You're welcome. And see you, mate. I'm just about to pull the plug anyway, so we're on the outer. Don't know. Currently, we're not suffering any lockdowns, but the world is a crazy place. Who knows? Hopefully not. But yes, it's crazy. Exactly. Currently, we can The only country in the world we can actually move to or go to is New Zealand. That's about it. But at the same time, the biggest problem is if they do a lockdown, something happens in either one of the countries, then, the government's going to basically give you the finger and the thanks, mate. Oh, I got to the bottom. Can you believe that? I got to the bottom. Oh, there you go. Anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And take care. In 4 hours, we're going to have the other live stream, which is the Eurasian one. So if you're around, do turn up. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't. Otherwise you'll be missing all this beautiful information and the comedy that goes with it. Anyway, see you guys.